before a piece of legislation actually gets to a vote, it's going to go through a committee. And so there's a couple of pathways in the Senate. That's going to be the Senate Banking Committee, which was, generally speaking, I would say kind of the most friendly committee to us. Obviously, Senator Elizabeth Warren is on the other side of that committee, but in terms of the Republican side of things, that was really kind of our best path, I think, and had the most of the kind of draft language that BPI and Bitcoiners generally cared most about. And so they released that piece of draft legislation. It had an interesting provision around stable coins, and we can probably dig into that a little bit more, Walker, if you want. But the gist of it was that basically Coinbase could not form a partnership per se with Circle or Tether and offer yield on those stable coins, which they were hoping to get, particularly given the specific language of the Genius Act, which was the piece of legislation that came through and was signed in June of 2025. And so that was, I think a shock maybe, or maybe they saw it coming, our friends at Coinbase. But they were willing to kind of draw the red line there and say, look, we can no longer support this piece of legislation because this is a crucial issue to our business model. And, I think it is worth underscoring that they really did kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater here, which is to say, like, Coinbase has a lot of really specific policy wins in that, larger kind of market structure bill, right? And for them to say, no, we're going to throw the whole thing away over this stablecoin yield issue, I think is really telling about where they see their business going. Maybe this is an indication that this sort of retail-facing exchange that they've been known for the longest time maybe isn't the future direction of Coinbase. Obviously, that's my own speculation, but I think there's a lot to read into here with the way that they've treated this piece of legislation. So that's the 3 weeks ago component here. I think you've probably already talked about this a fair amount. I know you've had some other folks from BPI on to discuss this, but the current status is, a week following that, we had the Senate Agriculture Committee, and everyone's like, why is the Agriculture Committee, talking about Bitcoin and digital assets? And, broadly speaking, that was, sort of the committee within the Senate that was most sort of pertinent for commodities, right? We think about agriculture, corn, soy, all of these crops that were, generally considered commodities, and obviously Bitcoin we know to be a commodity as well. And so that's why that particular jurisdiction comes into play. So they released their draft language about a week following the whole debacle in the Senate Finance Committee. And just for your listeners here who are mostly Bitcoiners, that bill wasn't of huge consequence to us. It did not include anything about the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act, those developer protections that we all care a lot about. It was more sort of classic market structure questions of, is the CFTC or SEC, who has jurisdiction over what? And so obviously important for folks in the broader kind of digital assets crypto community, not as pertinent for us Bitcoiners. So since that, really kind of no news from our end. There's obviously a little bit of shuffling going on, behind the scenes, but nothing to really discuss here. That's of consequence to the future of this legislation.
Yeah, I appreciate the rundown because, again, I think for Bitcoiners at least, obviously there's other stuff in this, right? There's a lot of jockeying. I think this whole saga between Coinbase and the banks and kind of this back and forth where they're sort of trying to do horse trading to figure out, hey, well, okay, we can't have Coinbase or other stablecoin issuers cutting into our profit margins when it comes to offering people a really low rate on their deposits, and they're trying to offer them 3-4%. That's outrageous. We can't have that happen. This was just very telling to me that legislation like this could get basically just stopped dead in its tracks because of the banking lobby. Or because of also the crypto lobby. Like the big crypto lobby is getting more powerful. They had some of the most spending of any lobbying groups in the last election. So, it's not just the big bad banks, it's also the big bad crypto, let's say. But I mean, is this always the way things work on DC? Does nothing actually get through anything without having whatever lobby might be affected by this give the stamp of approval? Because if so, I think that should piss a lot of Americans off.
Yeah, absolutely. I was at the Nashville Energy and Mining Summit, and just kind of meandering through the crowd, and I got this question like 5 times of like, "Hey Zach, what's going on with market structure legislation? Like, why does Coinbase have such a significant say over this? Like, Coinbase is not a senator, Coinbase is not like sitting in the vote being like, hey, I object to this." Um, the way that our political system works, for better or for worse, is that we have these very significant financial interests. We have the lobbies, as you call it, big oil, big pharma, like across the board, and these folks do hold a lot of power. These lawmakers, these policymakers, are to some extent, largely in an indirect way, and I, can explain that a little bit more. But they are beholden to these financial interests, right? We saw Fair Shake. I think this is a good example, kind of close to home for us. Fair Shake, put out basically the largest amount of, financial interest we've ever seen for elections in, this past election cycle. I think it was, there's some astronomical number. I'm not gonna remember it off the top of my head, but basically enough to sway a lot of these, Senate and representative races, right? We saw, I think the best sort of example here is Bernie Moreno, who was probably, screwed, right? Sherrod Brown was the seat that he was going for. And, maybe this is speculation, maybe this is kind of proven out, but Fairshake had a massive impact on that particular seat. And that did swing votes. So again, like just the point being, it's not the case that Coinbase is sitting in the vote in the Senate. They're not sitting on the floor saying, hey, we don't support this bill. But they are very, very, very important when it comes to election time to say, hey, we like this candidate, we don't like this candidate, and we're going to make our voices heard. And again, money speaks in politics, and so that's the way this is kind of borne out. But still, definitely shocking to see it kind of in play here, particularly on a piece of legislation that we care about. And I think the other thing that's important to think about here is going back to the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act. I know you had Kyle Olney on the show last week, who is far more kind of versed on this than I am. He's in DC on a pretty regular basis talking to folks. But the BRCA doesn't have a lobby for it. It isn't sort of similar to the open source problem that we see with open source development, which is there isn't an obvious kind of like profit payoff here. It's just ultimately the case that this is a public good, and it's incumbent on organizations like BPI to step in and say, hey, this is a really important piece of this legislation. We don't have, we don't have a ton of money saying, hey, this is the bright line for us, but we do have the industry and a lot of voters, right? And so when Kyle comes on the show and he says, hey Walker, like I need you and your audience to go and call your senator. That's because we are sort of deficient in the money game, but we aren't deficient in the voter game, and that's an equally important part here.
Just I have actually called both of my senators and Congress people and told them about the BRCA multiple times. I guess I'm gonna have to do it again. I've been very, very polite.
Yeah.
Just so you know, you don't have to worry about that. I kept the tone very, very polite and deferential, which is
that's great
for me. But
I'm
people
curious.
should do that. It makes a difference, right? It does move the needle if senators hear, hey, my staffer just told me that we've had 200 calls from constituents saying that this is really important to them, and they were motivated enough to actually make a call. Like, you may not be able to influence what that senator actually does, but you can at least put a little bit of a bug in their ear, right?
Yeah, I mean, question for you here is, how did those calls go? Because I've been in a ton of meetings with BPI, representing BPI. And so I know how that goes from a kind of industry perspective. BPI is in a sort of unique position because we are really trying to do educating, not lobbying. But I'm curious, like, how did that go for you? Did you get a staffer who was interested in talking to you? Was it like, hey, thanks for calling, I'll make sure to pass this on to the center? Like, how did those conversations go?
I got voicemails in all cases.
Okay.
So I left voicemails, but I also did have the conversations when we were in DC for the Bitcoin Policy Summit. And that was right around when we're doing that big push for the BRCA. And so I did have conversations. I tried to bring it up, some staffers are more open than others. two senators that I spoke to. I think I told you that story, but ended up getting somehow accused of being responsible for crypto ATM scams of the elderly by my senator, which was like, I don't even know how we got here, sir. I was just trying to say, I think open source developers should be protected, by law,
Yeah.
because it's fundamentally an American idea. And all of a sudden I'm getting yelled at by this guy. It was insane. But there are some positive things there. And that's maybe one of the things I want to talk about next is just overall public perception around Bitcoin and where we're at right now. We can maybe circle back on some of the policy stuff a little later, but I do want to get into this. And I want to talk about specifically about this Financial Times recent article that came out. So before we get into that, we're going to go ahead and roll the stinger, and then we're going to come and talk about this ridiculous Financial Times hit piece. So why is the Financial Times still running 2013 or thereabouts anti-Bitcoin takes? The Financial Times, or FT, is once again making the rounds with an opinion piece declaring Bitcoin's supposed doom, calling the recent pullback its, quote, worst crash since 2022. The article, written by longtime Bitcoin critic Jemima Kelly, leans into a familiar narrative. Bitcoin is on a doomed journey that ends, quote, splattered on the ground. It's the same script, but a different year. The irony, of course, is that while FT was pushing this take to its Asia audience, Bitcoin was trading around $69,000 to $70,000, up massively from prior cycles and nowhere near the existential collapse the headline implies. And as Pierre Richard pointed out, the FT even changed the headline to update the Bitcoin price, a move that mocked the editorial damage control to avoid publicly humiliating the opinion writer as the price ticked higher. So this was just kind of insane ultimately, because it initially said $69,000. Basically, is it's too high, at 69. They then changed it to say 70,000, and I guess they just thought nobody would notice. Bitcoiners were very quick to notice this pattern, though, and as Bitcoiners often do, we like to keep receipts. I myself highlighted that the same FT journalist has been bear posting about Bitcoin since it was around $300 per coin. So after this latest crash, Bitcoin is still up roughly 23,000% from those levels. And if that's a failure, it's the strangest one in modern financial history. But this is the real story. Why is a major financial institution still entertaining arguments that have been debunked repeatedly for over a decade? Bitcoin has survived multiple 70 to 80% drawdowns, sovereign debt crises, monetary debasement, regulatory attacks, and non-stop obituaries, coming up on 500 total obituaries now, all while continuing to make higher lows across cycles. And it seems that Bitcoin's loudest critics just purely aren't neutral observers. They are people who noticed Bitcoin early, oftentimes dismissed it, and never bought. It is a club famously represented by goldbug Peter Schiff. And this FT piece ultimately isn't some fresh analysis. It's a rerun. And Bitcoin, once again, just keeps moving on without them. But really, we all know that at the end of the day, they only publish these kinds of things because they know it gets clicks, and legacy media is failing at a rapid rate. So this is just one last dying breath, I think, for them while they try to declare Bitcoin dead. I want to bring Zach Cohen back up here. Zach, I mean, is this just deja vu for you all over again? Because it's getting ridiculous at this point. And I've, nothing, no personal attacks against this journalist, just to point out, though, that she's been saying that Bitcoin is a scam, Bitcoin's going to zero, it's a Ponzi scheme, whatever, since it was $300. I mean, I can't imagine having been that aware where you were writing news articles about Bitcoin at that price, never having apparently scratched the surface enough, going deep enough to say, you know what, maybe I should get some just in case it catches on. But I mean, do you think, is this just more broadly indicative of where we are at right now still after so much education, so many years? You guys are doing all this work in Washington. I mean, is this still just where we're at? Or is this maybe this is just, they're striving for clicks. They're trying to get clickbait out there. They want to get ad money. And so, they're just publishing this, even though they know it's kind of BS at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, hard to know exactly what's going through this reporter's head, and obviously what the kind of institutional agenda is for a publication like the Financial Times. But you know, yeah, I think there's this classic kind of like economics framework here, which is a sunk cost fallacy of, hey, I've been kind of sitting on the sidelines for Bitcoin. I knew about it when it's $300, now it's $70,000, and I didn't get in. And so instead of kind of redoing the economic calculus, I'm going to sit here and complain about it online and try to get other people to think the way that I do, instead of just sort of updating my calculus here of saying, wow, this thing has gone way up. Obviously it's had these boom and bust cycles, bull bear markets, whatever we want to call it here. But if we look at the trend, if we zoom out far enough and we see kind of the signal through the noise, there's something pretty serious going on here. Walker, one thing I've also been thinking about recently is all these people who are still like really into Ethereum, right? Like there's definitely this institutional sort of view on things of, hey, Bitcoin's too slow, or Bitcoin can't facilitate these smart contracts in the way Ethereum can, and the future of tokenization is on the Ethereum blockchain, and all these things, right? And more than ever before, we're at this point where the market has shown where the most valuable sort of asset is in the digital asset market, right? There's just simply no denying at this point that Bitcoin is the king. Again, not to say like, hey, you guys shouldn't like be doing this at all, but hey, like maybe you should reevaluate your institutional stance on this thing. I just think about these like big four consulting groups, or whoever it may be, and they're still very, very focused on the technical kind of digital assets. Like, we're going to use blockchain technology, and that was maybe a great narrative in 2020, or even maybe a little bit earlier than that. But the market has shown very, very clearly, and we see this through particularly looking at BlackRock and the IBIT ETF. The market favorite is Bitcoin. It's going to continue to be Bitcoin. And everyone just needs to get on board with that, or they're going to remain kind of in denial about where the market is heading here. And so I think just connecting these two, like this Financial Times article is very much in line with this sort of ETH head kind of agenda of hey, I still think I'm right about this thesis. I still think Ethereum's going to beat Bitcoin, and it's like maybe time for you to update your economic kind of calculation here.
Yeah, as an interesting aside regarding the Financial Times, a little fun fact for our viewers out there, which people may or may not be aware of, but the Financial Times was actively involved with the Bank of England during the First World War and purposefully lied on behalf of the Bank of England to tell the public, the British public, that the war bonds were oversubscribed, basically drumming up false support, saying that, look, these war bonds are so popular, everybody really wants this war, and look, you're gonna, they're safe investments, they're patriotic, they've got a whatever percent return, and they're oversubscribed, so you better pile in now while you can. Well, it was just a complete lie, and it took over 100 years for the Financial Times to issue a correction and admit that they had lied about it. So I think this is just indicative also of this the kind of the state of legacy media. There's really no integrity left. I don't know how much there ever was. This isn't to say that there aren't journalists with integrity. I think there very much are, obviously on an individual basis. But I think just the fiat ruins a lot of things. But journalism has certainly suffered in terms of just the incentive model, I think. And people realize that posting negative, poorly researched, or not even poorly researched, but just factually incorrect on purpose articles about Bitcoin generates more buzz than posting positive ones, talking about, who wants to hear about mining Bitcoin with hydropower in rural Africa in the Virungi National Forest? That's boring. Yeah. We don't want to hear about how it's completely changed the game for small African communities that were previously not even able to use the power that they had. No, we don't want to hear about that. We want to hear about how Bitcoin is going to zero, because it's just, it just feels like this kind of not sunk cost fallacy, but it's just, they have this bias. It's been there for so long. They need it to go to zero, because otherwise it means that they've just been living a lie this entire time and have missed out on the best investment that they could have possibly made. I think that's what it comes down to. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And the reason I use the kind of sunk cost fallacy, and maybe that not exactly the right
It feel
you know
intellectual sunk cost, maybe, you know?
yeah, but also like you know the reality is, if you've been sitting on the sidelines for however long, 10 plus years, and you missed out on 67 or 69,000 $700 of upward gain. Yeah, like that stings. It's hard to let that go, and think that your thesis that Bitcoin is worth less than $300 is still the right thesis, right? Because that's basically how they're voting with their wallet. um I think your other point is pretty salient too, and we obviously live in this time of declining trust in the media, alternative media sources cropping up. I think probably now more than ever, people are getting their news from social media, from Substack, from places that aren't these traditional media outlets, because they have almost certainly burned the trust of the people. And you know all that they can do now is come up with these crazy headlines that are just completely ungrounded in reality, to keep people on their platforms. And it works, right? Like, there are people who I interact with on a daily basis. I'm at a 4-year university, and people, they rely on the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times and the New York Times and the Atlantic, and all these outlets that have just completely missed the boat on this issue, and so many others. And you know that's how they keep them, where they want them, which is to say, here's this narrative that we've been pushing since 2012 or whenever it was, that Bitcoin's going to zero. And these people are so kind of convinced by these articles. They're so locked into this ecosystem of traditional media, that they think that that's true, that there's no sort of question in their mind of, oh, like, Bitcoin's at 70,000, but of course it's never going to go higher than that. Of course it's going to go back down to $250 or to zero, because that's what they've been telling me for the past 10 years, right? Like, that is literally the mindset of the people who read these outlets. And that's not to say it's a perfect rule, but that's been my observation. And there's just absolutely no incentive for somebody at the Financial Times to basically switch up on this narrative, both from a kind of personal perspective and from an institutional credibility perspective. Of course, you and I are sitting here and being like, well, every time you publish an article like this, you're nuking your sort of credibility even more than you would be by saying, hey, I was actually wrong about this. But if if your sort of loyal base thinks that you're still right about it, of course you're not going to switch up.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I think it's one of those things also, that idea of Gell-Mann amnesia when it comes to the viewer or the reader's part. That idea that, for anyone that's not familiar, Gell-Mann amnesia is the idea that you're reading a newspaper and you read an article about something you're very knowledgeable about. For you, maybe it's watercolors. I don't know what it is. And you are the expert on watercolors. You see this report on watercolors and how watercolors are burning the planet, and you say, well, that's obviously false. I'm the leading watercolor expert in the Northern Hemisphere. That's completely false. Then you flip the page, and you forget that because you're not an expert on the next thing. And you read it and you take it as face value. And you say, oh, well, Bitcoin must be going to zero because the newspaper said so. Completely forgetting that what you just read, and because you're an expert on it, confirmed that they actually don't necessarily know what they're talking about. It's not to say that every journalist doesn't know what they're talking about. It's just that a lot of times journalists are not experts on whatever the particular thing is. They're relying on external sources. They're trying to pull information together, get it to their editor, get it approved, and get it in print within a certain deadline. They do that every single day. They're not always going to be super deep subject matter experts. In fact, most of the time they are not. But people forget that. And it's like, I think also, though, it's a generational thing a little bit. I think the younger generations have a much greater distrust in general of institutional media. I mean, look at where young people aren't watching CNN and MSNBC and Fox. No, they're watching Roxom here, this stream. They're watching some other streamer. They don't want to consume from those sources. I'm pretty sure that like 90% of CNN's playtime just comes from having it on in airports where people are captive audiences, So I think we're at a shifting point here where young people don't really even, it's not even a question of whether or not they believe whatever story is being pushed, because they don't even see it. They don't even see that story. They're going to see it from other sources or get a different take on it. And I think that's ultimately a powerful thing. Like, decentralized media is a really wonderful tool. And the fact that we can sit here and being broadcasting, to people from all over the world. It's a beautiful thing. And I think it does change the paradigm because ultimately it holds these legacy institutions to account a little bit more and says, look, people they're not stuck here anymore. There's not just 5 stations on the TV, like when, the boomers bought their house for a bushel of raspberries. People have options. I hope people choose to check out, Roxom TV here. Of course, you guys have a podcast as well. And that's the beautiful thing. Like you can just go out there and be the news these days. And it turns out that we apparently need more of that because the actual news doesn't seem to be doing a very good job, as evidenced by this.
Yeah. I think you're spot on. And I think your point about, my generation, as a representative here for Gen Z, you're spot on. It's like, why would I, go read the New York Times? Like they're obviously wrong. And then, especially for people who are interested in Bitcoin, that's another kind of one shot on, trusting the traditional kind of media and agendas of these things, which is like, hey, you've been telling us that, the dollar is the place to save your money. And, you should invest in the stock market and bonds and, do all these things that your grandparents did to get wealthy. And that has failed. Like, maybe a couple of years ago, we would have said like, hey, maybe there's still a chance for these things. I just don't think that argument holds up anymore. And I think my generation has seen that. And, it's really, in my mind, just a matter of time until they come around to, hey, I'm going to go look for, a piece of media that isn't, obviously captured, like the New York Times, or they're going to say, hey, I'm going to go to Twitter and I'm going to follow these accounts that I trust because they're, people in my network and, they have this kind of credibility or this kind of expertise. Like, again, the tools are just so much better now. We have Sound Money. We have, Noster, or we have RoxomTV. We have all these great sorts of new technologies that are basically allowing us to build the future that we all want and a future that actually works for us, because the one we're heading towards, obviously isn't going to.
I say amen to that. And I want to do another kind of sentiment check here in a moment, just on the retail side and also just on the, we were talking about the FT and the Bitcoin side of things, but there's also this kind of crypto confusion that happens with Bitcoin. I know it's something that you guys are dealing with in Washington. I do want to get into that as it relates to the Coinbase Super Bowl ad. Before that, we do just have to hit a very quick break, and then we'll be right back here on Roxom TV with Zach Cohen right after the break. Don't touch that dial. We'll see you in a sec.
In a world far away. Nah, just kidding. This story begins in this world. It all started in 1460 in Antwerp, when the first commodities exchange was created, but the real transformation came in 1602, when the Amsterdam Stock Exchange was founded. Considered the oldest in the world, it was the first to trade financial assets. Over the years, Britain expanded its colonial and maritime influence, and the British pound sterling overtook the Dutch guilder in the market. Thus, the London Stock Exchange became the financial centre of the world. The 20th century came, and the world got into some trouble. But shortly after World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement established the dollar as the world's primary reserve currency, and the centre of the planet moved to Wall Street. Today, we're travelling at the speed of light towards a new age, an era shaped by the consolidation of Bitcoin as the currency that will define the future of the markets. We present Roxom, a new Bitcoin-denominated market that allows trading all sorts of securities, commodities, derivatives, options, and anything you can imagine. Roxom, rock-solid markets.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick, monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
No! Bitcoin! Come on, little buddy! Bitcoin! I need you! Don't go!
Welcome back to RoxomTV, everyone. My name is Walker America. The price of Bitcoin is just under 69,000 infinitely printable US dollars per coin. We're going to dive into our next story here, which is around Coinbase and their Super Bowl ad, which sparked boos, memes, and a bit of a retail sentiment check. So one of the most expensive ads on television ended with a bit of a thud. The Coinbase ran a Super Bowl commercial showing the lyrics to the Backstreet Boys' Everybody, and it was seen by roughly 120 million viewers. It was also displayed on the Las Vegas Sphere, and let's go ahead and take a look at that. Now, as cool as that looks, and as much as we are still talking about it, obviously, some people who saw the ad from their living rooms weren't that excited, at least not for the end of it. Let's go ahead and take a look at that.
Secure. Yeah. Everything you need, you better rock your body now. Everybody. Yeah. Rock your body. It's so loud. Everybody. Rock.
Okay, I mean, you can hear the outrage there. Online comments kept piling on with negative sentiment. Quote, Coinbase spending millions in return for getting more hate for crypto. And quote, Coinbase is a large part of the problem for that perception. Others mocked the moment entirely, calling it a rug pull on mainstream audiences who still feel burned by the last cycle. Now, the takeaway here is hard to miss. Centralized, splashy crypto marketing is colliding with a public that's skeptical and fatigued. Lumping Bitcoin in with a broader crypto casino confuses the message and undermines trust. Bitcoin doesn't need a Super Bowl ad or a centralized marketing department. It spreads because people discover why it's different, and we all become part of that decentralized marketing department. The boos and disappointments when the crowd realized it was a Coinbase behind the Super Bowl ad weren't accidental. They were earned. After nearly 5 years of promoting altcoins, NFTs, and meme coins, the public has been trained to associate crypto with scams, rug pulls, and speculation. When that's the brand you build, don't be surprised when the room turns on you. Luckily, Bitcoin is different. Zach, I want to bring you back on here to get your take on this. I mean, just seeing this sort of knee-jerk, visceral reaction from people when they find out it's Coinbase. I mean, what's your read on what that says sort of about the state of things? Because presumably they also think Coinbase, crypto, Bitcoin, all the same. Like when people heard, Sam Bankman-Fried, oh, he was the Bitcoin guy, right? Like all of this gets lumped in. Is that your read on this as well?
Yeah, you're spot on. I was at a Super Bowl party with, some friends from school this past weekend, and, everyone's singing along. It was almost verbatim how it showed up in this video. And, I'm just sitting in the corner and, my friends know what I do. And they were like, Zach, what do you think, Zach? Should we buy some Bitcoin? Like, all that kind of classic reaction. And, I think probably like two components here for us to dig into. One is people do recognize Coinbase, and that is an interesting kind of component here. Or I might be. I think at the end of the ad, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it said like crypto is for everybody. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the general idea.
Okay.
Not Bitcoin is for everybody, but crypto is for everybody, of course.
Yeah. So I wonder. I guess maybe to rephrase a little bit, like, there's a question of like, do people know what Coinbase is, right? Were people booing because they saw Coinbase or because they saw crypto? I'll say in the room that I was in, I think people actually didn't really recognize the Coinbase brand, and they saw crypto is for everybody, and that's when the reaction kind of came up. And so, yeah, I think that's an interesting component that maybe even Coinbase hasn't really gone totally mainstream. And then, yeah, obviously the reaction of booing or sort of, concern or skepticism, right? Of, hey, like we had this great ad and we thought it was going to be like, a music company or, some kind of company that would go along with like a karaoke style ad, right? That's very classic kind of tech company of, hey, like we're Google and we're going to do this whole like feel good sing along thing. And then we're just going to put our logo at the end and then, good sentiment to us, right? It is really interesting that Coinbase tried to do this, and did it work? Did it not work? I don't know. It's tricky because there is a sort of subliminal marketing, thing going on here, which is, hey, we did like a whole minute of sing along. We got everybody feeling super happy, and then we put our ad at the end and or our logo at the end, and that's going to sort of have a return whether people know it or not. At the same time, maybe it backfired, right? That's the question that I think we're trying to answer here. But yeah, broad strokes here, people are still very skeptical. I see that with my friends here at school. And at the same time, people are starting to see these things and associate it and say, oh, okay, maybe this crypto thing is here to stay. I may still be skeptical at this point in time, but what happens kind of further down the road? Should I be buying this? They just spent so much money on this ad, right? There's so much kind of complexity to this whole reaction here. I think we could probably spend the next 3 hours talking about it. But definitely an interesting thing, reaction for us to pick apart here.
Yeah, from a marketing perspective, it's interesting because obviously we're talking about this right now. The ad has gone viral outside of the Super Bowl. It's being talked about a lot. Yeah, most of it is people hating on it. But from a marketing perspective, in terms of just brand recognition, boy, it's a pretty effective way to make sure that everybody, if they didn't already, knows the name Coinbase. So from that perspective, maybe that was always the goal, was kind of the, to Rickroll people basically with a bait and switch where it's like, oh yeah, Backstreet Boys, everyone, no.
Yeah.
Damn, crypto again. But I think there's also like something about it happening during the Super Bowl. There's another component to it where people remember the Tom Brady ads. They remember, the FTX ads. They remember the crypto.com ads. They remember the Coinbase ads from a couple of years ago. And that was right when a lot of people may have bought in at basically the top, and then everything just, crashed, right? So I think that maybe that's some of the reaction you're getting. I think a lot of it though is still just as we zoom out here a little bit, what's difficult is that we are clearly still dealing with a perception problem in quote crypto, because Bitcoin gets lumped in with that automatically, because people who maybe got burned in the last cycle and said, I'm not touching crypto again, they're never going to take the time, or at least not anytime soon, to figure out why Bitcoin is different. And I want to bring this back to DC a little bit. What is the general vibe that you get from politicians about the separation, let's say, of Bitcoin and crypto? Is it becoming more clear? Do stable coins almost help with that separation? Because that's clearly on kind of the crypto side, but it's so different than Bitcoin. What's the current state of that? Is it basically the same as this, kind of the retail sentiment, or are they starting to maybe get ahead of the curve a little bit, even as politicians, which may sound counterintuitive?
Yeah, good question. I think there's probably an important distinction here, which I'll start with. And one is, the administration versus Congress, right? The administration is decisively pro-Bitcoin. There's very little question about that. Obviously, the Trump family and their kind of dealings are crypto and digital assets friendly, but from a like legitimate policy perspective, everything that's come out of the White House and the Treasury has been decisively, kind of understanding of Bitcoin's difference from the larger digital asset, kind of industry and ecosystem. And that's really important to highlight, right? When Donald Trump was campaigning, when he was at the Nashville 2024 Bitcoin conference, and he said, we're going to build a strategic Bitcoin reserve, right? Like they were serious about that. And there's still no indication that they weren't serious about that. I think a lot of people are saying, well, hey, why haven't they bought Bitcoin for the strategic Bitcoin reserve yet? It's, which is a fair skepticism. Of course, we'd like things to move more quickly, but that's not how it works in DC. There is just this very deep bureaucracy of how these things need to get executed, and there needs to be an office created in the Treasury Department, and all these things that are part of putting together a national Bitcoin strategy that we never expected to be done by this point in time. The fact that the ball is rolling, the fact that there is an executive order on the table, all of this is a clear indication that the administration understands Bitcoin, understands that Bitcoin is distinct from the larger, crypto kind of, shitcoin casino, and that they understand Bitcoin's value, particularly as a strategic national asset. So that's side one. Side two is Congress. Congress is a lot trickier, right? The White House is, it's a Republican Party. Everyone in the administration is generally following the marching orders of the president, and that's pretty set in stone. There's a lot more kind of back and forth going on in Congress, the Senate and the House of Representatives. We have folks on both sides of the aisle. We have seen this become an increasingly partisan issue, which is a whole nother problem. But there is, I think, a baseline level of understanding, particularly among these Congress people's staff, right? The folks on their staff who are working on the digital asset issue, who understand the distinction between Bitcoin and stable coins and Bitcoin and Ethereum. That's not to say everybody in Congress has that baseline understanding, but we are much further along than we were, maybe a little bit ago. And then Walker, the other thing that came up for me as you were talking just now was, I think there's also an extent to which the people that were shown booing this ad or feeling very skeptical about Coinbase are probably the same people who are reading these Financial Times articles, who are reading the New York Times, who are getting their news about crypto with a very specific bent to it. And I would be booing too if I believed everything, the Financial Times was saying about Bitcoin and crypto. And so, I think these things are connected. I think there's a reason why, folks on the Democrat side think a particular way about this, right? There's this narrative that's associated with that part of, kind of politics at large that seeps down into people watching the Super Bowl in their homes. And, I think, broadly just, the point here being these things are connected. We see this in Congress, and, this is largely the reason that the White House has been, further ahead on this, because, the Trump administration, right? They were like, hey, we're gonna believe in Rumble. We're gonna put our weight behind Rumble and say, hey, we think this is a really important thing, media outlet per se, to counteract the influence of the existing kind of traditional media. And I think it's just really interesting to kind of put these pieces together, and fun to see them kind of coincide in these recent pieces of news.
It's an excellent point about the likely crossover between those two demographics of people who boo Coinbase ad. To be fair, I might have booed the Coinbase ad too. I was watching it live. So I can't entirely blame them. I'm perhaps booing for completely different reasons than they are. I'm booing because they're an obvious shitcoin casino that I think, while they may not have made as much money at the start if they went Bitcoin only, they would ultimately have really done a lot more for their reputation and for the actual important thing here, which is Bitcoin, if they would have stayed Bitcoin only. But they didn't. And now you see them also pivoting into prediction markets, right? This is really
Yeah.
the new thing. All of these different crypto casino apps, Robinhood included, because I'll lump them in with it, they have pivoted to prediction markets, as that's what they're putting front and center now every time you're opening these apps. And I think that also, at least my writing on the wall, if I'm looking at the tea leaves, what that's telling me is they actually know that the crypto grift is nearing an end. They know that there's one last bit of exit liquidity they can probably suck out of some people who, when Bitcoin starts going up again and cryptos kind of follow it up, that they'll be able to finally do one last dump and then they'll get out and be clean. But they're going to pivot to prediction markets because it's ultimately an acknowledgement of what we already knew, which is they're not concerned about Bitcoin and hard money. They're concerned about enabling gambling. And you're free to gamble. I don't care what you do with your money. It's a free country. But at least now they're being more honest about it and saying, yeah, we're just doing prediction markets, which is just ultimately most of it is sports betting. So that's what we're going to focus on now. And by the way, the crypto stuff, yeah, don't worry. Now you can just do real gambling on here. You don't have to do fake gambling and pretend gambling through crypto. I don't know if I'm off base here, but that's my read on this.
No, I like it. I like it a lot. Yeah, and definitely the stablecoin angle is important here too.
Yeah.
And I think as we discussed kind of earlier in the conversation, I think Coinbase showed their cards with the way that they're treating this market structure legislation. And again, kind of dying on the hill of stablecoins. I think that's indicative of maybe where they see some of their business model going.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you there. I know we've got to get you out of here pretty soon. So maybe I just before we wrap up with you and get you on out of here to your next thing, would you mind just telling people maybe a little bit of where they can go to find out more info about BPI, the awesome work that you guys do, and also if there's anything coming up that people should know about, just in terms of the BPI calendar or things that you guys are really focusing on in the coming months and the rest of the year?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is btcpolicy.org. You can see all of our most recent research on there. For folks who aren't familiar, BPI is a 501c3 think tank in Washington, D.C. That means that we're not lobbyists. We aren't, throwing a bunch of money at candidates during the, election cycles. We are employing a staff of over 20 research fellows to conduct leading edge Bitcoin research to inform policymakers in Washington, D.C. So we open source all of the content that we share with policymakers. You can find all of that on our website. We're on social media. You can find us on X. Our handle is @BitcoinPolicy. And we've got a bunch of exciting things coming up. We haven't announced this formally yet, but we are conducting our annual Bitcoin Policy Summit that's going to be in September here in Washington, D.C. So a little forward advance notice on that.
All right.
Make sure to mark your calendars down. We'll have more info on that soon. But yeah, shoot us a message anywhere. We've got some contact info on our website if you want to get involved. But yeah, folks keeping up on their work is really the best thing that we can ask for.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate all the work that you guys do because I know it is not an easy task. From the one afternoon I spent on the Hill trying to do it, I do not envy the Herculean task that is ahead of you, but I think you guys have a really great team of people working on it. And I'm glad that you guys are. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I would rather have a government full of Senator Lummises than Senator Warrens. And it seems that, of course, we're losing Senator Lummis, sadly. She's retiring.
I know.
Well, hopefully we'll have somebody to step in and fill her shoes. They are big shoes to fill. But just all I hope is we just don't get more Elizabeth Warrens. Let's just decrease the ratio of Elizabeth Warrens there. But Zach, appreciate it so much. Thanks for joining us here on Roxom. We're going to be doing this Bitcoin Policy Hour here every week moving forward, unless you guys have something come up. But really looking forward to it, to getting more people from the Bitcoin Policy Institute here on the show on Roxom so that we can stay right up to date with all the awesome work you guys are doing. So thank you so much for joining. We'll go ahead and let you out here. I think we'll go to a quick commercial break, and then we'll come back with a few more news stories, and then we will dive into another section with Rob Wallace from Bitcoin News. So do not touch that dial. Again, we will be right back here on RoxomTV in just a moment. Stay tuned.
In a world far away. Nah, just kidding. This story begins in this world. It all started in 1460 in Antwerp, when the first commodities exchange was created, but the real transformation came in 1602, when the Amsterdam Stock Exchange was founded. Considered the oldest in the world, it was the first to trade financial assets. Over the years, Britain expanded its colonial and maritime influence, and the British pound sterling overtook the Dutch guilder in the market. Thus, the London Stock Exchange became the financial centre of the world. The 20th century came, and the world got into some trouble. But shortly after World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement established the dollar as the world's primary reserve currency, and the centre of the planet moved to Wall Street. Today, we're travelling at the speed of light towards a new age, an era shaped by the consolidation of Bitcoin as the currency that will define the future of the markets. We present Roxom, a new Bitcoin-denominated market that allows trading all sorts of securities, commodities, derivatives, options, and anything you can imagine. Roxom, rock-solid markets.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick, monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
No! Bitcoin! Come on, little buddy! Bitcoin! I need you! Don't go!
All right, welcome back to RoxomTV, everyone. My name is Walker America. Here on Roxom, we are broadcasting at a Bitcoin price of just under 69,000 infinitely printable US dollars per Bitcoin. But as we apparently have some larger crypto market contagion and Bitcoin being declaring dead again by the likes of the Financial Times, we're also seeing Bitcoin search volume spiking. So again, cryptocurrency prices broadly have been sliding. All the altcoins obviously follow Bitcoin wherever it goes. But online attention has been splitting into opposite directions. Google searches for Bitcoin have surged their highest level in a year after the token plunged towards $60,000, while broader interest in, quote, crypto has fallen to a near 12-month lows. This divergence reflects a market in distress. Casual investors are drifting away from digital assets altogether, and even as anxious traders concentrate almost entirely on Bitcoin's violent swings. Data shows that global searches for Bitcoin hit a peak score of 100 in early February after prices tumbled from about $81,500 to near $60,000 in just 5 days. The drop erased hundreds of billions of dollars in market value before a partial rebound above 70,000. Analysts say such a sudden collapse typically triggers panic-driven spikes in search activity as investors scramble for explanations, technical levels, and signs of whether a deeper crash is coming. Market data suggests some buyers did step in at lower prices. CryptoQuant shows increased purchases from US-based investors during the sell-off, while analysts at Bitwise say the rebound reflects selective, quote, dip buying rather than broader confidence. But the recovery has been uneven, with altcoins lagging badly and many smaller tokens continuing to slide, as they rightly should, all the way back down to zero. This reinforces Bitcoin's role as the sector's main focal point in times of stress. At the same time, public enthusiasm for crypto as a whole is fading. Searches for crypto are hovering around 30 on Google's scale, close to their lowest level in a year. The total market value has fallen more than $4.2 trillion at its peak to $2.4 trillion now. while daily trading volumes have dropped roughly $153 billion in January to under $90 billion now. This pullback suggests many retail investors have stopped participating altogether. Sentiment indicators point to deepening pessimism. The Crypto Fear and Greed Index has plunged into extreme fear territory, matching levels last seen during the 2022 Terra collapse. Research firm Sentiment reports that negative commentary now dominates online forums and social platforms, with traders increasingly focused on capital preservation rather than speculation. Together, the data points paint a picture of a shaken industry retreating into its core asset and the only one that actually matters, Bitcoin. As interest in the wider crypto ecosystem evaporates, Bitcoin is absorbing most of the remaining attention, serving simultaneously as a benchmark, a refuge, and a source of anxiety. Some analysts argue this mix of fear, falling participation, and selective buying could signal a market bottom. Others say it reflects fragile coincidence, with investors watching closely but unwilling to commit until volatility subsides and trust begins to return. Joining us now, we've got Rob Wallace from Bitcoin News to get a little bit of a pulse check on the sentiment. Rob, how are you doing, man? Are you happy seeing all these altcoins continue to slide? Because I know
people seem to have smartened up, it seems, to the grift, the scams, the rug pulls. And it really came to a pinnacle, I'd say, in 2024, 25 with the meme coins, right? It really peaked at the winter of 25. We had Malay getting scammed into launching his own meme coin, on a presidential level. Somehow he survived that. But I think that marked the top for crypto grift. And now it is time for Bitcoin to spread its wings and show people what this asset class is really all about.
Yeah, I think that you're right about that sort of toppiness in just absurdity. Because at a certain point, you saw this progression, right? Of initially, every crypto that was out there was talking about how it's better than Bitcoin, right? It's the next Bitcoin. That was the narrative originally. I'm talking years ago now. The next Bitcoin, it's better, faster, stronger, whatever it might be, but it's better. Buy my shitcoin. It's better than Bitcoin. And then it sort of moved into, well, there's just different utility that it's not competing with Bitcoin, but there's other utility that it offers, and so that's why it's better for these these different things. And then now it kind of got to the point where it was like, oh, this is a meme coin. We're calling it what it is. This is just a meme coin. It has no value except what the community gives it, and the whole NFT thing as well just like further added fuel to that fire. And I feel that once you saw Trump and Melania coin launching as well, a lot of people just kind of went, oh, okay, so it's just a money grab. And I feel like that was a bit of a switch flip for people where, in case it wasn't obvious before, crypto only exists to basically enrich its token printers at the expense of retail who get duped into buying it. But it's nice to see at least the sentiment kind of remaining negative for crypto. Obviously, again, high search volume for Bitcoin. Bitcoin's prices are not doing the best right now, but I think you're right. You don't have anything to worry about if you are not one of those people who is heavily invested in the crypto side of things. Now, if you are, you have a lot to worry about, and you should probably get out while you still can. But I don't know. It feels like, I think you're right. We've entered a bit of a new territory where, especially with prediction markets now being pushed by every crypto casino, they're just acknowledging what's always been obvious, that crypto was just a vehicle for gambling, right? There was not any actual value here. And it marks it as very distinct from Bitcoin, but they're now basically saying, look, we're just going to give you guys real gambling. You don't even have to worry about the crypto thing anymore. Just do real gambling right here on the platform. We'll cut out the middleman of these token printers, and you can just have fun speculating on these sports games. Is that kind of your read on this too, especially with this pivot to more prediction markets for Robinhood, Gemini, Coinbase? I'm sure plenty of the others, they all seem to be doing it at the same time.
Yeah, it seems as if the gambling section of this industry, if you want to call it, always needs something new and flashy to draw attention, grab new people, and just become more and more addictive, right? And it seems these prediction markets, being able to vote or predict or bet on absolutely anything, provides the mask is gone. Now people can just straight up just vote on whether Cardi B is performing at the Super Bowl, and if she's on stage or not, and whether she shakes her butt, that counts as a performance or not, right? So it's getting really out of control. And especially because, I mean, say what you will about Trump, some love him, some hate him, but it does seem when it comes to the crypto markets, crime season is kind of here, right? I mean, we had a $500 million deal from one of the sheiks in the UAE right before he took office, buying up a large portion of the World Liberty Fi token in order to get them a first in line slot for some AI chips, of course. And then you have the CFTC. I just saw an article come out last night saying that a lot of their top lawyers who are in the middle of their careers are being laid off because it just seems as if there's no impetus from the people in charge to go after bad actors from the Commodities and Futures Commission. So it's interesting times. The one moment where the lid is just completely taken off and people are allowed to go out and do whatever they want because it's coming from the top down with presidential meme coins. People have wisened up to it, it seems, and they've gotten sick of it, and they're looking for truth, and that's why Bitcoin's here.
Yeah, it does feel like this is a bit of a gift where we're at right now with this dip. I know it may not feel like that for people. I know this is difficult, but I've entered just a bit of a Zen-like state at this point because while all this crypto grift seems to just be kind of deteriorating around it, it's like, yeah, Bitcoin's price is down a bit. But honestly, Rob, I never thought I was going to be able to buy Bitcoin at these prices again, which to me is like a massive opportunity for people. I mean, do you think that there are more people right now who are kind of approaching with that attitude? Or has this on the Bitcoin side of things, I mean, just scared more people away and they're still just going to do the same thing where they don't line up for Bitcoin at 70K, but they line up for it at 150K?
Yeah, right now, I don't think that there is a narrative out there that's drawing the attention of the common person, right? ETFs are done. Strategic Bitcoin Reserve executive order has been signed or just about a year ago. There's nothing really new out there in the market to grab the attention. And of course, number go up is the best marketing device that Bitcoin has. And so I do think that we have to maybe wait until we get a new class of people to really jump on board and dive into Bitcoin. Because of course you get enamored by the number go up and then you just find out all the amazing things, whether it's freedom tech or just the way that it can connect people too, right? There's so many cool stories around the world when it comes to Bitcoin, and those don't really get the shine in times like this.
Yeah, come for the number go up, stay for the freedom go up, right? And that's the thing. No, you're absolutely right that number go up is the best marketing tool for Bitcoin. It's what brings people in. It's just good old-fashioned greed. And just speaking of the number go up side of things, Alliance Bernstein just said Bitcoin could hit 150K this year. I think it's a little bit bearish, but I'll run through this story a little bit for you, Rob, and then I'd love to get your take on it. So asset management giant Alliance Bernstein, which oversees roughly $779 billion, says Bitcoin's upside case is strengthening, not weakening. And I think this is also an interesting dynamic between retail and institutional sentiment. In a recent analyst commentary circulating across markets, the firm argues this cycle looks structurally different from prior booms, with no major blowups, hidden leverage bombs, or systemic failures dragging price lower. Bernstein's call centers on market resilience. Unlike past cycles marked by exchange collapses or credit contagion, recent drawdowns haven't exposed fatal cracks. Volatility has been absorbed without forced liquidations spiraling out of control. A key reason analysts describe this as the weakest BTC bear case in history. Now, on the numbers, Bernstein has reiterated a $150,000 Bitcoin target tied to expanding institutional allocations, steady spot ETF participation, and improving market depth. With BTC supply growth capped and new issuance now post-halving, analysts point to asymmetric upside even if a small percentage of global portfolios rotate toward Bitcoin. The thesis is simple but data-driven. Demand is broadening with structural risk shrinking. In Bernstein's words, quote, "Nothing blew up, no skeletons will unravel." For a market that once lived and died by leverage excesses, that quiet durability may be the most bullish signal of all. Rob, I want to bring you back on for this because, again, I think this speaks to this disconnect that I'm seeing right now between the institutional vibe on Bitcoin, who seem to be broadly viewing this in terms of the ones that are in the know that have been paying attention to Bitcoin. They're viewing this as an opportunity. They're saying this is an incredibly mispriced asset. Meanwhile, you've got the larger, let's say, retail world out there who seems quite content dancing on Bitcoin's grave and saying, "Oh, thank goodness I didn't buy that scam." What's your read on that? Do you think there is this kind of disconnect here, and why is that?
100%. And I think it's because we were primed for euphoria, right? Q4 of last year was supposed to be it, the 150, 200K blow off top that we were promised 4 years prior, but it didn't show up. And so we sort of missed out on that euphoria, and then we just dropped 30, 40%. And when that happens, expectations are just, now we don't know where we are, right? We're in very unknown territory. If we had gone up to 200K and then came down to 60, I think people would be much more understanding of, okay, this is just how it goes. Everything is cool. Just bide your time. And within a year and a half, we'll be off to the races once again. Now it seems murky. And that's one thing that markets really hate, especially in an asset that is so new. We're only 17 years old here. And we only have 3 data points, right? Like 3 cycles in the past that we can really go back and try to line ourselves up to. So it makes sense that people are confused right now, but nothing's changed, right? The tech is still there. The protocol has been up 99.9% of its whole entire existence. There's nothing fundamentally threatening it. And so you just have to bear this out. I mean, I remember back in 21, of course, with the China ban, and we dropped 50%, but this feels different, right? Because we were able to relatively quickly go back up, and we still have to wait and see if we can do it just as quickly as Bernstein says, hit 150K this year. I still think it's a possibility, but we're probably going to have to hang out here for a couple months. And it's a great opportunity if you're a Bitcoin believer to stack some cheap sats and get that cost basis down after a year plus of buying over 100K.
Amen to that. And I think it's interesting too, because right now there's a lot of very obvious narrative pushing around Bitcoin. Now, apparently the thing is to call it pedocoin. And you see all these political influencers who previously never talked about Bitcoin at all, kind of coming out of the woodwork and all of a sudden talking about, like, Roger Ver talking points about how Bitcoin was hijacked and it's really pedocoin and all this stuff. And then you look and, then you see a lot of the crypto people also coming out of the woodwork. And if you see a crypto person saying that and you just search their profile, I guarantee you will find posts that are talking about how XRP is better than Bitcoin. So that's nothing new there. But what is new is sort of this concerted push from the political influencer side of things to really try to denigrate Bitcoin and throw a lot of totally just unfounded FUD at it. Are you tracking that too? Have you been seeing this trend? Because it seems very coordinated to me. Maybe that's just a coincidence because everyone's just figured out that that's good engagement bait, rage bait that works well. And so that's what they do. That's their whole shtick. They're political influencers. They hop on the rage bait bandwagon. I mean, do you think that's the case? Is it as simple as that? Or is there more of a concerted push that you're seeing?
I think there's 2 factors here. I do think the fact that Bitcoin appeared in the Epstein files is not a great look. I mean, I think we know, of course, that it's open source software. You can go and examine the code and know that there's no backdoors. There's nobody who can inflate the supply, none of that. But for people who are outside of the sphere, they don't know that, right? And they could think that there was some undue influence from money people under Jeffrey Epstein's influence to change Bitcoin at some point. So and because, of course, Satoshi is anonymous, we don't know who it is, these sort of amorphous claims that Jeffrey Epstein had ties to the beginning of Bitcoin, they can tend to linger in the common public's mind, right? Because there's no way to truly dismiss them and get them out of here. So I do think that might be something that sticks around for a while, which isn't great. But at the end of the day, Bitcoin is a tool. It's open source. We know its power to change the world for the better. And I just hope that the good things about Bitcoin will outshine anything that happened in the Epstein files, of course. On the other side, the whole entire narrative about Bitcoin being hijacked, the fact that they're using the word hijacked is just a dead giveaway that this is a psyop. There is some money behind this. They're pushing influencers to do the same Roger Ver talking points from his book that came out a couple years ago to try to push the idea that this is the wrong Bitcoin that we have right now, which is a complete fallacy, of course. And yeah, I mean, Roger Ver, he had some law problems, but he paid it off. He paid, I think, $40 million to get those tax issues to disappear. And he's chilling, and he's probably still got a lot more millions to go and push whatever narrative he wants. He was on Tucker Carlson. Brett Weinstein is pushing this narrative. Corbett Report, who's like an old school conspiracy theorist guy that I used to listen to back in the day. I just turned him on, and he was talking about Bitcoin and Epstein. So yeah, it does seem to be going around this intellectual dark web sort of sphere. Those guys, the Brett Weinsteins and whatnot, that to push this narrative about Bitcoin. But people just did their research, they would know that there's nothing to it.
Yeah, it does get a little frustrating for those of us who have been paying attention and studying Bitcoin and podcasting and talking about Bitcoin and reading about Bitcoin and everything for some years now, because you just realize how kind of mid-curve so much of this FUD is. It's just really low effort, mid-curve pleb slop at the end of the day. But it's more of, I guess it's politislop. It's not pleb slop. It's a slop variant. And it's just a little bit tiresome because you're sitting there thinking, come on. It's always a question. Do you actually believe this? Insert pundit. Or is somebody paying you to say this? Like, are you just super misinformed and ignorant? Or are you being purposefully misleading? And it could go either way on any of these cases. But I do agree with you that when you start seeing the words hijack getting used or referencing Vare's book specifically, it becomes a thing where you say, oh, okay, got it. Now I see what's happening here. But the problem is that we have that context, Rob. Most people don't. And so if they're just seeing this, it's from an influencer they follow, or they're seeing it from a news organization they follow, they're just going to take it at face value and say, oh, again, it's one of those things where people love to see something that confirms their bias, to see something that says, you see, I was right to not buy Bitcoin. I knew it was a scam. And look, now it's a pedophile coin. But the irony to me here, Rob, and I got to go off on this for a second, because the ridiculous irony here is that Epstein wasn't using Bitcoin to launder money for his blackmailing pedophilic intelligence asset operation. He was using US dollars through JP Morgan Chase. They paid hundreds of millions of dollars in fines to settle that case with victims. That is a tacit admission that was all true. We know it was true. He banked with them for years. He was still banking with them even after his public solicitation and prostitution case was made public. So they knew this, but he was a very valuable client. So it's like, if this was all about, this is Bitcoin's just for criminals, it's for laundering money. I mean, give me a break. Criminals use the US dollar. Jeffrey Epstein was using the banking system, which is supposed to have AML, KYC, and all of that stuff to keep us safe from the money launderers. But apparently it couldn't catch a pedophile blackmailing intelligence agent. And so to me, this is just, it's all a little ridiculous. It's like, what are we even talking about here? Anyone can use Bitcoin, anyone at all. But there's not even really evidence of him using it. Did he try to exert influence on it? Of course. Tried to exert influence on everything. On all of our politicians, on big corporate leaders. Of course he was going to try to do it on Bitcoin too. But can he exert influence on it? Did he? No, ultimately, because of how Bitcoin works. And that's, I think, the amazing thing. That should be the takeaway, is that every other one of these institutional pillars got compromised. We've got people, pedophiles at the highest levels of our government and corporate structure. Bitcoin doesn't care. You can, even if you compromise multiple people, you're not compromising Bitcoin. I think that, sorry for the rant there, but it's just the juxtaposition against, JP Morgan Chase laundering money for this pedophile. It's just a little bit ridiculous to me. I don't know, I'm guessing it's as equally ridiculous for you.
Yeah, and I give props to you for helping to spread the meme of Jeffrey Epstein's banker, of course, referring to Jamie Dimon.
Jack Mallers for creating it. I was just the messenger helping to spread it. Jack Mallers created it, and I said, that's genius.
Yeah, and you added the gasoline that helped get it around the internet, and I think that will be one of your lasting meme marks on the Bitcoin space for sure. But it's true. I mean, Bitcoin's a neutral tool. Of course, anybody who deals with a lot of money is going to be interested in it. These people were sending money around the world, and that can be used for good or bad, right? It's a tool, and so it's very interesting when you look at these Epstein files, though, in terms of the people that they were dealing with, right? It seems as if the world was really revealed as to how it is really run. And it seems that there are these cliques, right? There are these power cliques, and they have their handlers and people who represent them. And I mean, Jeffrey said in the emails, I represent the Rothschilds, right? And so he was the handler, the fixer for that. And it's so funny to see how he with that position, he was able to talk down to heads of state and just like email mob these guys with like horrible spelling and the worst punctuation. But then when he's talking to somebody who he respects or represents another power clique, it gets completely different. The writing style, it's in full paragraphs, and he tries to explain himself thoroughly. One such example is Peter Thiel. When he speaks to him, he is very much saying one power broker to another compared to when he's speaking to some random sheik or even Bill Gates. He's like just straight up email mugging him and just being extremely dismissive. So it's wild to see this inside look into these power worlds and what they care about. And it's just as dark as you could have feared as a Bitcoiner conspiracy theorist as I am. I've been looking into this stuff for a while now, and just to have it confirmed, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good.
Well, you didn't want it to be true that our world is essentially run by a satanic cult of pedophiles. No one would want that to be true. But then it's like, oh, well, guess it is. We're paying taxes to satanic pedophiles. Like, great. Thank you, IRS, for continuing to take the fruits of our labor. Do you think this is a moment where it's a bit of a phase shift, a paradigm shift, where after this stuff becomes so public that there's kind of no way for people to ever have any institutional trust again? I mean, it was already on the decline, institutional trust broadly, not just in the US, across the world. Is this sort of the final nail in the coffin? But does that even necessarily mean anything? It doesn't matter if the institutions aren't trusted, if they're still the ones making the rules. Do you know what I mean?
100%. And I think that they just dumped it in this fire hose fashion in order to sort of just make people numb to it. There's so much out there now, and you can find whatever bad stuff you want to, but the average person, do I think that they're outraged or willing to go out onto the street and make a ruckus because of it? No, man, people are too focused on trying to just get by, pay the bills, and make sure that inflation doesn't eat the little bit of purchasing power that they have left. So maybe this was the tactic, just to dump it all at one go, and then just say, here, it's out there. Everything you ever wanted, go and look for it. We're being open and clear with you. Now what? What are you going to do to us? And so far, the number one way that I can see is to opt out with Bitcoin, right? And I do think this will radicalize some and lead to some new content creators and whatnot talking about what is actually going on here. But in terms of a mass awakening, I don't see it. It's been 2 weeks, right? And what's been has anybody on the street that you've talked to outside of Bitcoin circles brought it up? No.
Yeah, it is, I guess, a little bit disappointing. I mean, maybe it just speaks to the fact that people are just tired of it. And there's just I think you're right about sort of the way in which this was done. And I hope a lot more of it gets unredacted, because there's a lot of questions out there where it's like, we just saw that the particular sheik, I'm forgetting his name now, Suleiman, was the one sending Epstein torture videos. It's like, well, nothing's going to happen over there. The guy's royalty. Like, oh, but so it just turns out the incredibly cozy regime with the U.S., who we've gotten into bed with for oil reasons, they're just sending blackmailer pedophiles torture videos. So that's great. I mean, it's just this thing. It's all so very dark. You don't want to believe it, but this stuff is true. And I think that you're right. At the end of the day, clearly there's not much. The system's not going to fix itself from within, is what I always come back to. The system is not going to have a critical look at itself and say, well, I guess we should just get all of the pedophiles and evil people out of government, because there's just too many. There's just, what are you going to do? I mean, you could make the government a heck of a lot smaller. I'd love to see that. Give me an early birthday present. But at the end of the day, the best way to actually approach this is to opt out with Bitcoin. As you said, it's to take your economic energy and move it to a system that is not corrupted by their access, their proximity to the money printer. You saw all of the kind of economic secrets trading that was happening with Epstein too, getting warned ahead about various bank programs and things like that. I mean, this is just what you should expect from the fiat system. It is captured. It rewards people closest to the money printer, and all of their friends can benefit from it massively because they have insider information. I think that, again, the sad thing is, to me, Rob, all of this stuff should wake people up to Bitcoin more and the need for neutral money when you see all of the kind of financial abuses that were happening here, not to mention all of the, actual rape and torture and everything else. But the way that these people are actually controlling the world is through the money. But instead of making people wake up to that, apparently the new narrative is that Bitcoin is actually the thing that can save them is part of the problem. The thing that can save them is pedocoin. And I mean, that's just, boy, I don't know. Maybe they are not worth saving yet. Maybe that's too harsh.
It's hard. And I do think that one thing we must be aware of ourselves, especially as people who are consuming a lot of news and create content and getting it out there, one thing we need to be sure about is that just noticing is not going to change anything, right? I think we trick ourselves into thinking sometimes that as long as we post a couple things and talk about it a little bit, then we're fighting against the man. But no, that is just sort of reinforcing the narratives, right? We're not taking our energy and moving it into a different system. So I think you got to focus on the things you can control, right? Your physical ability, your family, the time you spend outside of the internet. What are you doing? How are you making yourself more self-sovereign and taking the energy out of the system that is ruled by these people into one that we want to build in the future? And I think Jeff Booth, of course, talks about that a lot. And when you talk to somebody who actually is taking their energy out of this system and putting it in another one, you can just sense it, right? There's this aura around them. And I think we got to be aura maxing our outside the systemness.
I like that approach a lot. And I think it is correct. And again, I think that a lot of people view Bitcoin where it is right now as somehow, again, they're hoping that it's going to die or they're hoping that it'll just go away so they don't have to pay attention to it. But in reality, this is one of the best times to start accumulating Bitcoin, not when it's going up, but when it is down, when it's languishing. And this kind of brings us to our next story, which is a short one, but I want to jump into it quick before we hit this next break, which is that Bill Miller said that 60K was the Bitcoin bottom. Billionaire investor Bill Miller IV went on CNBC and delivered a very clear, very bullish message for Bitcoin. He believes the bottom is likely in and that a major liquidity shift from the Fed could push prices higher from here. Let's go ahead and take a look at the video.
That's how I teased it. You have a number in mind. What is it?
I actually think there's a reasonable chance we saw the bottom last week at 60,000. There's a couple of reasons for that. First and foremost, $60,000 is the cash production cost for a new Bitcoin.
Okay.
So what happens is when you get below that, the weak miners start going out of business, they shut down, and they're the main source of marginal selling pressure. So when the weak hands are out, okay, you have a less selling pressure and it's likely to put in a bottom. The second reason is Bitcoin trades on global liquidity. And if you look at when it peaked in the fall, it just so happened to be the exact same time that the Fed noticed huge stresses in short-term funding markets that effectively created an entire 180 on monetary policy. So if you look at what the Fed was doing in the fall, they were allowing $50 billion a month to go off of their balance sheet, just drain away. Now, what happened in December? They did a complete 180 on that. And what they're doing is buying $40 billion net a month. So you've seen a net swing in liquidity from the world's largest liquidity provider to the tune of $90 billion a month. So you have this huge floor of liquidity, right, that just came in. You've got the cash production costs there. And there's another technical element here, which is if you look at historical bottoms in Bitcoin, they've often happened when the percent of the supply in loss exceeds the percent of the supply in profit. And 60,000 is right around where that happens. So you have a whole bunch of factors converging at around 60.
All right. The takeaway is hard to miss here from Bill. Minor capitulation and on-chain stress and a massive Fed liquidity reversal are all lining up at the same price zone. In Millard's words, the bottom is likely in. Rob, let's go ahead and bring you back up here because, again, it's people like to make a lot of calls. I like Bill. Bill knows his stuff. Awesome guy. Has been super bullish on Bitcoin. Both he and his father are legendary value investors at Miller Value Partners. They're huge Bitcoin bulls. Bill's been pretty consistent on his takes. I mean, are you with him on this? For me, at least, it feels like the bottom is in. This feels like peak capitulation. This feels like peak fear, uncertainty, and doubt. What's your take? Do you think there's still a chance? I mean, do we have to hit 58K for the 58K gang prophecy to be proven right before we can go up, or is the bottom already in?
It would be poetic, right? If we
would.
went so very close to 58K but never got there. That would be the best way of markets doing everything the opposite of what you expect. Yeah, it does feel like this is the bottom, especially the way we bounced off of 60K on Friday last week, going from 60 up to 72, an 18% return in just a day. That felt pretty good, and that gives us a cushion, right, between where we are now, around 68, 69, down to 60. The question is, markets can either scare you out or wear you out. And it feels as if we do kick around in the 60s and 70s for the next couple of months, that will lead to more capitulations, people rage quitting and leaving. And sometimes that's what markets and Bitcoin demands. You need that sacrifice of people who just throw up their hands and can't take it anymore. And so if that's you, I'm sorry. But if you can just hold out for another 6 to 12 months and just listen to Bernstein, right? We can see 150K by the end of the year, but can you last these next 3 to 4 months, which I think will try a lot of people's patience.
Yeah, I think you're right. And that's the thing. Bitcoin does reward the patient. It rewards that low time preference because most of the gains, like basically all of the gains of Bitcoin are made within a couple days of a year. A Checkmate, Check on Chain has some great analysis on this that basically shows for 6 to 10 days a year, that's where Bitcoin does all of its upward movement. If you miss those days, you miss out on all of Bitcoin's gains, essentially. If you're not in the market, if you're trying to trade this, if you're trying to, be a genius swing trader. And the reality is that for 99.999% of people, you should just buy Bitcoin and hold it. You should DCA. That's why I always recommend DCA to friends and family because it's not scary. You just buy a little bit at a time. You're good to go. You can set it and forget it. You don't have to worry about trying to time the market. You can just spend time in the market. And so I think that that's ultimately the best thing, unless you can spot the tops and the bottoms, pit, path, piffy, wing, wong, wang, as the old why I am hodling meme goes. But Rob, we're going to jump to a quick break here, and then we're going to come back with a few more stories. We've got some cuts at crypto companies. We've got the Coinbase ad. We've got a couple of other things that I want to talk to you about. But first, we're going to run to a quick break here on RoxomTV. We'll be right back in a moment, folks. Don't touch that dial. We'll see you soon.
In a world far away. Nah, just kidding. This story begins in this world. It all started in 1460 in Antwerp, when the first commodities exchange was created, but the real transformation came in 1602, when the Amsterdam Stock Exchange was founded. Considered the oldest in the world, it was the first to trade financial assets. Over the years, Britain expanded its colonial and maritime influence, and the British pound sterling overtook the Dutch guilder in the market. Thus, the London Stock Exchange became the financial centre of the world. The 20th century came, and the world got into some trouble. But shortly after World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement established the dollar as the world's primary reserve currency, and the center of the planet moved to Wall Street. Today, we're traveling at the speed of light towards a new age, an era shaped by the consolidation of Bitcoin as the currency that will define the future of the markets. We present Roxom, a new Bitcoin-denominated market that allows trading all sorts of securities, commodities, derivatives, options, and anything you can imagine. Roxom, rock-solid markets.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
security matters. Zappo Bank, the only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
No! Bitcoin! Come on, little buddy! Bitcoin! I need you! Don't go!
Welcome back to RoxomTV, everyone. My name is Walker America. I am here with you every Tuesday from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on RoxomTV. The price of Bitcoin right now is $68,937, or as we like to call them, infinitely printable US cuckbucks per coin. We're going to jump back into our next story of the day, and it is around some large staff cuts at Gemini. So to dive into this story, and then we'll bring Rob back up, our guest. Gemini, the crypto exchange co-founded by the Winklevoss twins, or the Winklevi, confirmed on February 5th it will lay off about 25% of its workforce across the US, UK, and Singapore, up to 200 jobs, as it restructures around artificial intelligence and refocuses on the US market. The move follows years of downsizing, with Gemini's headcount shrinking from roughly 1,100 employees in 2022 to about half that size by the end of 2025. The Winklevoss twins said that the cuts reflect a deliberate shift towards a smaller, faster organization, quote, leveraging the right tools, pointing to AI as a major productivity driver. Gemini has integrated AI from AWS, Databricks, and TradingView, while also developing in-house AI systems to support engineering, operations, and market analysis. The founder said AI has pushed productivity beyond traditional, quote, 10x engineer models, allowing teams to deliver dramatically with far fewer people. But at the same time, Gemini announced, that it will exit the UK, European Union, and Australia. New accounts in those regions are already blocked. Existing accounts will enter withdrawal-only mode on March 5th, and all crypto and fiat assets must be withdrawn by April 6th. Now, Gemini has partnered with eToro to help customers in those markets transfer funds elsewhere. Susie Violet Ward, a co-founder of the Bitcoin Policy UK and RoxomTV host, said Gemini's departure reflects where capital is flowing amid regulatory uncertainty. Quote, Gemini's exit seems to be about friction, Ward said. Quote, the company is leaving the UK, Europe and Australia, while focusing on the US and Singapore, which tells you capital is moving to jurisdictions where firms can operate with clarity and scale. She added that prolonged uncertainty makes it harder to hire and invest, warning that without clear, timely rules, the UK risks further crypto company exits. Now, Gemini said it will double down on the United States, setting deep capital markets and a more supportive policy environment as Washington advances new digital asset legislation and pro-crypto initiatives. Let's go and bring Rob back up here. Rob, do you think this is just about utilizing more AI and this is a natural thing that's going to happen with all these companies? Or is this bear market vibes of companies downsizing to try and reduce costs? Or is this really just about the regulatory side of things, that these jurisdictions are fundamentally unfriendly to these types of companies?
I'm going to go with D, all of the above. Yeah, well, to kick it off, UK has been a brutal place to try to do any type of Bitcoin business. The Bitcoin Policy Institute over in the UK is shutting down as well. They were unable to get the funding needed to pay the people who they had. Some very talented, of course, a fellow Roxom host, Susie was working there. Of course, Freddie New was leading it up as well. He's a lawyer. He knows what he's doing. He's got great connections, but they just couldn't find the support to keep it alive there because the regulatory climate is so brutal over in the UK. So if the Policy Institute is shutting down, then Gemini is shutting down. UK had claimed that they wanted to be a crypto hub for years. I think they were very jealous of what was going on over here in America, in our capital markets. But it just didn't work out. It's a little too hoity-toity, old school, I guess. The FCA is not that kind of a regulatory agency. They are very strict. They crack down hard on these companies. They want to know everything about what you're doing when it comes to Bitcoin and crypto. So just to relieve themselves of the headache, they are exiting the UK in total. crazy move. Definitely doesn't seem like something happens in bull market times, though, right? This is definitely a bear market move. You've got to consolidate, stick with your winners. America, Singapore, Asia, US, definitely going hard in terms of digital assets. And of course, AI. Yeah, AI is coming for jobs. It is happening now. And if you are one of those people who think it's a fad, you got another thing coming, because if you are on X as much as I think you and I are, you know what these bots are capable of. And I think everybody is going to face a very weird world come 5 to 10 years from now, not knowing where our place is in terms of knowledge work and the way that we give back to society. So all of the above are reasons why Gemini is leaving the UK. And I would say AI is the one that I'm thinking about the most, for sure.
Now, I think that's fair. And just on the sort of regulatory piece, though, I do think it is a really important factor here, just because we're seeing this more and more, right? Companies, just like people, will vote with their feet. When you have regulations that are unfriendly, which make it too burdensome for a company to operate profitably in a region, they're not just going to continue operating at a loss, they're going to move elsewhere. El Salvador has done a great job of attracting companies there with very favorable tax laws as far as their treatment of individuals and tech companies. I think we start to see that more and more, especially from smaller countries that realize, hey, we can attract a lot of capital here just by not being a total nanny state. I mean, do you get that vibe as well?
That's the sovereign individual thesis, of course. Yep. It'd be great to see some more examples, though, of small nation states, jurisdictions opening the doors to Bitcoiners and companies innovative on the tech scene. I mean, the fact that El Salvador did it not only with Bitcoin, but also AI is very cool and very promising. And this is not something that just happens overnight, right? This is 4+ years in the making, to where they're finally attracting companies like mempool.space. Of course, Tether is building a giant tower in San Salvador. I think it will be one of the top 5 largest towers in Latin America when it's done in a year or two. So they are attracting capital and talents. It's coming to El Salvador, but where's next, right? We see the Dubai and these places attracting a lot of capital. I mean, when you look at the number 1 and number 2 countries for millionaire flight in 2025, it was number 1, China, and number 2, the UK. All of UK's talent and wealth is getting out of there as soon as they possibly can. These laws, as we're seeing with the FCA and crypto, are just an example of one of the reasons why. It's not a great place to start a business. And the whole entire welfare state model of the EU is it's really facing reality at this moment. And they need demographics. The only way you can have a welfare state work in any regard is to have a population pyramid that is actually correct. But now it's inverted, right? And so they are having a lot of immigrants come in to try to support the economy and build it up. But yeah, and we just saw Spain is allowing 500,000 people from Africa just to come in and become EU citizens just for showing up there, right? And then as soon as you get that in Spain, you can go anywhere you want in the EU. So it's wild times over there, and my heart goes out to the EU Bitcoiners who have to deal with this madness on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, you cannot have a welfare state if you have open borders, but that's a different story and a whole nother rabbit hole. Just because we did bring that up a little bit with just some of the madness going over there. I do want to get into this Coinbase story a little bit, but before we do that, just on the heels of this, I want to talk a little bit about these attacks that have been happening in France. With all of these different crypto and Bitcoin people. And like whenever you see an attack of somebody who's in Bitcoin or crypto, it's like you check the country and it's France somehow. So let's run this, and then we'll finish off on a lighter note, because this is actually like very concerning for anybody living over there. I think it's not a safe time to be in any way a public figure or even a private figure, but with all these data leaks. But let's get into this story, and I want to get your take on it here, Rob, as well. Because again, we've seen Bitcoin users increasingly get targeted in France. Reportedly linked to a cryptocurrency ransom plot. But the incident has intensified concerns that France is facing a growing wave of violent extortion tied to Bitcoin and crypto exposure. According to authorities, the two women were abducted from their home in southeastern France, held for roughly 30 hours, and later found injured but thankfully alive. Investigators say the attackers demanded payment in cryptocurrency, part of what officials describe as a broader pattern of organized groups targeting people believed to have digital asset ties, not necessarily public figures or known investors. This case has reignited debate inside the Bitcoin community about physical security, legal protections, and state response. Critics argue that perpetrators often face limited consequences while victims are left navigating strict self-defense laws and slow judicial processes. French officials have acknowledged a rise in crypto-linked extortion and kidnapping attempts over the past year, raising alarms about copycat crimes and organized operators. One of the loudest voices warning about this issue is Kevin Loeck, the CEO of Wizard Sardine. In his recent X-posts, Loeck said France has reached a point where ordinary people who have merely used Bitcoin, attended meetups, or paid taxes on it are now being treated as potential targets. Quote, France is really fucked up. I have to explain to my relatives living there that at this stage they will get kidnapped someday, and there is nothing I can do about it. If they defend themselves, they will be the ones to go to jail. Kidnappers basically don't get punished. He argues this is not a technical problem, noting that even advanced tools like vaults and time locks don't stop kidnappings, and the attackers often don't even succeed in extracting funds. Loeck warned that fear itself may be the objective, urging people not to live in panic but to communicate clearly with family, involve authorities immediately when threatened, and consider relocating if possible. He also points out that while kidnap and ransom insurance security trainings exist, they are largely accessible only to the wealthy, leaving most everyday Bitcoin users exposed. So, Rob, I'd love to get your take on this, because for me, this makes me very glad that I live in the United States of America, where I can have many guns inside my home in different locations. And we have the castle doctrine here, which means you can protect your own castle. You can use lethal force, and be legally justified in doing so. I mean, what's your thought on this? There's been a lot of stuff about there was someone inside the government leaking this information, leaking these lists, and we've seen these attacks just go, increase and increase and increase. I mean, to me, it does not seem safe for anybody over there who's even remotely connected now that these lists have been leaked to outside sources.
Yeah, and France has a lot of laws that contribute to all this being so bad there, right? They're looking to pass an unproductive wealth tax, where of course you need to tell the government all the assets that you own. Bitcoin is on this list of considered unproductive, and then of course you would need to pay taxes on it every single year, even if you did not sell. They also want you to just tell them the balance of your Bitcoin every single year when you report your taxes, thus creating a giant honeypot. And as we saw this last year, a tax official sold a list to organized crime, and that led to a number of kidnappings across the country. I believe 80% of the wrench attacks across the world in 2025 happened in France. LOP has amazing records of all this if you're interested in finding out more about the Bitcoin attacks. Yeah. But yes, and it's insane that it feels like anarcho-tyranny, right? There are rules for some and there are no rules for others. And who benefits from anarcho-tyranny? It benefits the managerial class. Those who can squeeze those who actually have some wealth, have some Bitcoin, while allowing them to live in fear as they let other crimes just happen across the country. So it's a horrible mix. You've got pensioners who are making way more than the average person in their 20s and 30s in France just because they were born at the right time, were able to get on the welfare train in the right decades. It doesn't seem like it's a winning equation here. Something really has to give. And these attacks on Bitcoiners, I mean, I think I saw some pictures online of a crypto conference in France, and they had crazy security, right? Like beyond anything you would ever see here. Because, yeah, if you are a publicly known Bitcoiner there, you got to watch your back.
Yeah, and I think it's also, again, so much of this does come down to what the legal structure permits in terms of your own self-defense and what's, viewed as legitimate self-defense in the eyes of the law. Because ultimately, when a criminal who wants to commit violence against you doesn't have any real fear of reprisal, either from you, because they know that you are, they could ultimately end up suing you somehow if you take the force too far in your defense, or from the state, because the state has very lax treatment of criminals. Like, this is what you get. You have a broken incentive system where criminals are protected and innocents are punished by the state. And I think that's ultimately just, it's one of the reasons I'm so very glad to live in America. I love French. I love France. I love French people. But ultimately right now they need to get their house in order. And I think, again, this is one of those things where you're going to see these sorts of things continuing to happen in all these countries that have been completely neutered and disarmed. This is one of the reasons we have guns in America and the right to carry and bear arms. And people want to say, well, guns are the problem. Well, they're not the problem, because Switzerland has I think maybe even higher guns per capita than we do here in the US, and they have a fraction of the crime. So maybe it's not the guns. The UK doesn't have guns right now either, but they've got all these knife attacks. How's that possible? There are no guns. Guess we better blunt the tips of the knives, which is a legitimate thing they have talked about and just blows my mind. But yeah, get out of France if you're there and in any way have been publicly associated with this through these data leaks. Because I truly think it's, like, without any hyperbole here, I do not think it is a safe situation to be in over there.
No, the numbers just keep getting worse and worse. So do it now. Vote early, right? You've got the billionaires fleeing California because of the billionaire tax, and hopefully it's just an example to regular people that it pays to act quickly. To not wait until things have already completely broken down to make those big moves, to liquidate, transfer wealth into Bitcoin, then get free and move around the world to where you are treated better.
Yeah, or that you can at least have a gun, or 6 or 12, or however many you'd like. I want to move on before we let you go here. Move on to the last story. We'll end on a slightly lighter note, which is around the Coinbase Super Bowl ad and the booze, memes, and retail sentiment check it has sparked. One of the most expensive ads on television landed with a bit of a thud. Coinbase ran a Super Bowl commercial showing the lyrics to the Backstreet Boys' Everybody, and it was seen by roughly 120 million viewers. Some people who saw the ads from their living rooms were not too excited about it, at least not for the end of it. Let's go ahead and take a look.
Secure. Yeah. Everything you need, you better rock your body now. Everybody. Yeah. Rock your body. That's so loud. Everybody. Rock.
Okay, I'm sorry, but this video just gets me every time. It's absolutely hilarious. Let's bring Rob back on up here. Rob, I want to get your thoughts on this. Okay, you see this reaction to Coinbase basically rick-rolling people, rug pulling them. What's your read on what this says just about where we're at right now in the market, and especially as it relates to retail sentiment?
Yeah, crypto is not cool right now. People who got in 2017 or 2021 and rode a wave that Coinbase was pushing, right? They had NFTs up front. They put meme coins up front, and now it's prediction markets up front. And people were just burned again and again and again. And you can only do that for so long before people hate you. And now Coinbase represents big crypto and just IPO'd scammers, right? People who have made a lot of money off of other people's greed, and now they are reaping the not too good rewards of having done that for over a decade now. And it's so funny, you're right? It's a rug pull, as they've done so many times before with these different coins. And another thing I want to bring up with you that I would love to pick your mind on is, how old is that song? It's 25 years old, right? And yet that is like the music that can connect a room, right? Why is our culture so stagnant that we need to use a pop song from 2 decades and a half ago in order to create a moment where people are cheerful and happy together to sing around. It's like, why is our culture so stagnant? And why does that song represent something that people unite around?
I think it's because it's pretty hard for a room of people to sing along to Bad Bunny. From the limited amounts that I've heard, I think that's a little bit of a tougher sing-along type vibe there. I'm not even sure if native Spanish speakers know what he is saying. I just recently discovered that Bad Bunny is, in fact, not a woman and is a man. So I'm clearly not the best subject matter expert on this. As it relates to the culture, though, I think that there's always nostalgia in every generation for what came before, what you grew up with, right? And I think that a lot of that has sort of become even more intense, where even some of the younger generations who don't have they have a nostalgia for something they never got to experience, because it was this world before phones, before social media, before the 24/7, 365 rage bait news cycle. It was truly just simpler, not without its own problems, but I think that now it's this time that cannot ever exist again. And so you have people, even younger generations that again, were not around for that. They're, Wi-Fi natives, right? You and I, we remember, well, I'm not sure exactly what but I'm guessing we both remember dial-up and DSL and a world before Wi-Fi and cell phones. My first phone was a Motorola Razr at age 16. They will never know that world. And so we all feel this nostalgia for it because we remember how simple it was, how seemingly, not carefree. Again, there were plenty of problems, but somehow more pure, maybe less adulterated. I think that's what it comes down to. And so now you see these even younger generations kind of saying, well, I wish I could go back. Look, none of them have cell phones. They'll watch these videos and it's like, there's something tragic about that, because the Zoomers, Gen Alpha, Gen Beta coming up along here, they will have been born in a generation where they have access to the most incredible technological tools, but they also can't get away from them. And so that's a strange paradox. What's your take on it?
It's true. I mean, it does. If you look back, a song came out in what, 99, 2000, right? And it all pre 9/11, right? Peak Americana,
Yeah.
like everything. It was a different world. It seemed as if it could only go up from there. Nothing could hold us back. And then it's just wild to see how the last 25 years have really played out and how many times this country has shot itself in the foot and yet still sees itself and actually is in the leading position in many ways. It just goes to show you the entrepreneurship and intelligence and gumption of this country. But yeah, Backstreet Boys, Britney Spears, that was a era that was sort of, while it was peak materialism in many ways, there was still this innocence about it where it was easy to think, hey, we're the good guys. Everything is fun. We're just going to keep on pushing forward into the 21st century. And then let's see how the 21st century turned out, right?
And reality came with a big slap to the face there. I also have this theory that there hasn't actually been like a meaningfully good comedic movie made that was made before 2009. Like everything that came after the financial crisis was ultimately just kind of like trash and not that good. It's a rabbit hole. I've had a tweet go pretty viral about this. Actually, I might have to unearth it again to get some of those sweet X ad bucks, but I digress. Rob, we're running up on the end of our time here. Really appreciate getting the chance to chat with you today. It's been long overdue for you and I to have a rip here together. Where do you want to send folks who can check out more of what you do, to follow Bitcoin news? Send them wherever you want.
Yeah, absolutely. Just check us out. We're on X. We go live every single day as well. Check it out. And we got a newsletter. Comes out every Monday morning. Bitcoin News Weekly. Sign up for that. Link is in our bio on X. I'm here every single day on the internet, so you don't have to spend as much time scrolling as Walker and I do, but we love it, so we're happy to.
We're the shield, so everybody else can be the tip of the spear, right? Absolutely.
100%.
Rob, thank you so much for joining. This has been a pleasure. Looking forward already to getting a chance to have you back in the near future. Thank you to everybody who's tuned in so far. We are back with one more hour of this 3-hour marathon here. Up next, we've got Brandon Gentile, who will be joining me next here on RoxomTV. Before that, we're going to go to a very quick commercial break, and then we will be back with Brandon Gentile right here on RoxomTV. Stay tuned.
In in a world far away. Nah, just kidding. This story begins in this world. It all started in 1460 in Antwerp, when the first commodities exchange was created, but the real transformation came in 1602, when the Amsterdam Stock Exchange was founded. Considered the oldest in the world, it was the first to trade financial assets. Over the years, Britain expanded its colonial and maritime influence, and the British pound sterling overtook the Dutch guilder in the market. Thus, the London Stock Exchange became the financial centre of the world. The 20th century came, and the world got into some trouble. But shortly after World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement established the dollar as the world's primary reserve currency, and the center of the planet moved to Wall Street. Today, we're traveling at the speed of light towards a new age, an era shaped by the consolidation of Bitcoin as the currency that will define the future of the markets. We present Roxom, a new Bitcoin-denominated market that allows trading all sorts of securities, commodities, derivatives, options, and anything you can imagine. Roxom, rock-solid markets.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
No! Bitcoin! Come on, little buddy! Bitcoin! I need you! Don't go!
Welcome back to RoxomTV. My name is Walker America. We're going to bring on our guest, Brendan Gentile, in just a moment. But before we do that, we're going to give you a little update on some news that came out just this week around Discord, which is going to globally require biometric face scans or ID verification for full access next month to protect, quote, teen safety. Unverified accounts will automatically be placed into a teen-appropriate mode that blurs mature and graphic scenery, sends friend requests from unknown users to a separate inbox, hides age-restricted servers and channels behind warning screens, and a couple other items. But Discord says it will also use a background age inference model that analyzes account activity and behavior to identify many adult users without requiring explicit verification. The policy builds on trials in the UK and Australia, and the company says it's to, quote, reinforce teen safety by preventing minors from being exposed to harmful or inappropriate content. Critics, however, point to a recent third-party data breach that exposed tens of thousands of users' ID images as evidence that the risks involved with this strong, sensitive personal information system. Now, some worry that facial scans and IDs could obviously be mishandled by Discord yet again and then misused. Discord insists that selfie video age checks are processed on the user's device and that ID data is deleted quickly after verification. Wink, wink. But skepticism persists online. With more than 200 million monthly active users worldwide, the new age verification requirements mark one of the most sweeping access changes in Discord's history. To talk to me about this and a whole lot more, we're going to bring up Brendan Gentile. Brandon, how you doing? Friend of Roxom, welcome back to the show. It is good to see you again, my friend.
Great to see you, Walker, as always. And of course, There's only a week or two to go by, and there's always a million more things to talk about. So
the news never sleeps in the 24/7 365 information access world. Now, Brandon, this thing that Discord is doing, obviously, in this case, they're not really being pushed to do this, right? Or that we know. This is apparently a voluntary action on their part, but it's built on these trials in the UK and Australia, where we know they've instituted these various digital safety acts to basically have ID verification for anyone to be able to access the platform. And you need that to keep the teens off, apparently, but it also requires everybody getting ID. Now, they're saying that's not going to be the case here. They have other ways of doing that, and you're only needed if you're going to access sensitive information, graphic content. Okay, we're all for protecting kids. But I don't know about you. To me, this just seems part of this larger trend of, if you want to use any digital services, you need to have your ID linked to it. And I'm just very wary of that. Also very wary. We all want to protect the kids, right? You and I both have kids. We want them protected. That's our job first as fathers, as parents. But when the government starts saying it, or in this case, a company doing it, out of their just benevolent goodwill, I start to question what the real motive is. Maybe I'm just too conspiratorial. What's your take on this?
Well, you have every right in the world to be conspiratorial because, as we've seen, all the conspiracy theorists were right, for decades and decades and decades. And, it's just the incentives of society. We know it's starting from first principles. We know it's a fallen world, and we know if we incentivize humans to act out their worst desires and cover up for them and be opaque and have no transparency, then it's only going to fester and get worse. So it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that a lot of these things happen, because if you look at it from those first principle standpoints, then it makes sense, actually, that people are going to do these things. And only can you disinfect darkness with light at the end of the day. So that's, fixing the money is the first thing, obviously, and what we all obviously talk about, because that fixes the incentive structure. It shores up the oil spill upstream that's polluting everything 10 miles, 100 miles, 1,000 miles downstream. And we are just living out these remnants of trying to, because it's funny, Walker, honestly, like some of these things, like you said, on surface, like when you put them in a vacuum or a silo, it seems good. Like you said, like we want to protect kids, we want to do these things, but it's like the problem is we're so far down the oil spill, down the stream, that it's just putting Band-Aids on bullet holes. And so it actually has the worst outcomes, actually, or worse outcomes than what the solution was. It makes me think of the COVID thing with Trump too, of, we don't want the fix to be worse, or the solution worse than the actual problem itself. And that's a lot of what it is. It's government being the arson and the firefighter, whether it's intentionally or not. It's just, you can't have good fruit from a bad tree. If you choose evil, if you choose broken money, fiat currencies, which is evil, then you're going to get the consequences of evil. Every choice after that is then tainted. And it's almost impossible to have anything good coming from that bad tree. So, here we are, because again, it's like you can make these arguments for either side, and it's, well, it makes sense. We want to, if we really wanted to help the kids, though, we would fix the money, number one, and then we do other simple, really quick things like, hey, who's on the Epstein list, right? We and what's going on there, right? Like all these things. So it's this constant facade that we just play around. But again, we talked about this a lot, but I think the 40, 45 and under crowd, not to say there's not anyone older than that doesn't care, but the younger generations are sick and fed up of the lack of transparency, and just like, we're going to go along with a handshake, just trust me, bro. And that's coming to an end. It's the year of, the audit. I think it's, Nolan Bowerley, who's been talking about this. Scott Adams, before he passed, obviously, was talking about the year of the audit, 2026 going forward. Bitcoiners are very well adjusted at auditing, verifying before you're trusting what's happening. And that's what I think the world is really quickly, or just even right now, starting to wake up to, hey, we have to go through an auditing process of life and start asking these questions before we just blindly go into things. So all that roundabout way to say about the Discord thing, it just seems like more of like it's like a symptom of the greater problem, right? It's just like, sure, of course, another company is doing this thing with the benevolent, good intentions. Well, the Patriot Act is there to, we need Homeland Security. I mean, this is a wild stat, Walker. This is 240, as of like a year or two ago, there's 240,000 workers at Department of Homeland Security in America, which was an agency created 20 years ago. That means 20,000 people a year have been added to the Department of Homeland Security after 9/11. And what in the world they're all doing? Have they stopped all kinds of terror? I mean, we still have terror. We still have things going on all around the world. So I don't know what they're doing, Walker, but I'll get off my high horse. I could go a million different ways with this. So.
Well, no, I appreciate that. And I think for me, it always comes down to, in this case, again, we're talking about Discord specifically. That's obviously a company, but this larger trend that we've been seeing in Australia, in the UK, in Portugal, in France now, of we need to do X, Y, Z. The government needs to step in and create more regulations and more regulatory moat ultimately for these companies to protect the children. But what does this ultimately do? It doesn't end up actually keeping anyone safe. People find ways around this, right? What it ends up doing is creating a even larger, deeper, wider, more impassable regulatory moat for the biggest players out there who can afford the high-priced lawyers, the massive compliance teams, all these things, and it prevents any smaller players, any non-incumbents, any new entrants, any startups from being able to ever get a meaningful foothold in any of these industries. It's and the big corporations like this. It's why Sam Altman at OpenAI is, in Congress testifying to say we need more AI regulation. It's the same sort of idea here where they kind of like this, right? Because no small upstart is going to be able to afford to compete with this. And I think we see this over and over again. And then people wonder, well, there's so much, power in the hands of just a few players. And it's like, well, because the government keeps making it possible to do so. You don't have these, the government has a way of kind of creating monopolies. It doesn't usually do much to bust them. I don't know if you've noticed that as well.
100%. And it's also the honeypot nature of like how many times we've seen, like you said, regulatory capture and the moat, which are all awesome points. And I think of like the other, not the other side of that, but maybe just another thing to add to that is just these honeypots that it creates and these huge attack surfaces that are, hey, all of a sudden the government or these companies have all this information and they say like, wink, wink, like, oh, we're not going to keep your information. It's deleted right away and yada, yada, yada. It's like, okay, like how many times, it's like humans have 6 higher faculties, memory, will, perception, reason, intuition, and I forget the last one, but that's what separates us from animals. Animals only have the 5 senses. We have the 5 senses and 6 higher faculties. Memory is one of those. And people seem to forget what happened yesterday, let alone what happened 5 years ago and what happened 20 years ago to them. And so we're just like constantly beat over the head. We act like monkeys. Therefore, we're treated like monkeys. And we can't be trusted with our own intuition and using our memory and these things that have happened to us in the past. It's like how many of these attacks or these huge data breaches have happened where people just willingly, 23andMe, I'm giving you my DNA and I'm doing all this stuff. And this is used against you over and over again, all in the name of good. What's the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and here we are. And so it's hard, and this is where you go into AI and all these different things where if you have the wrong incentive structure, and you have a fiat currency, and you have the incentive structure flipped where people are at odds with each other and it's a zero-sum game, you're going to get bad outcomes. It's inevitable because of the incentives of the system. And this is where Bitcoin becomes the only hope, where if you want good outcomes or the chance of good outcomes, you want to put people on the same side of the table, meaning you want a neutral money that people can use at their will and no one can censor. That's it. And a store of value. You can save your time and energy, which is your wealth at the end of the day. So you want that so you can do things in your own volition instead of being forced or coerced or, it's inflated away or censored at the barrel of a gun. So it's a wild time because it's going to keep happening. Unfortunately, it looks like where we have to keep learning these lessons until we have more pain, max pain. And then eventually humans learn, ?
I don't know if we do. Because
don't say that.
We try. Some of us try, but then you see this is a good segue sort of into this story about the Financial Times and that recent. I'm sure you saw the recent ridiculous article that they published about it. I want to get into this with you a little bit, but I think beforehand we've got to roll a stinger just to bring us in and get us into the moment. So let's roll that stinger, guys. Maybe not. In that case, we'll just dive right into the story. So I wanted to talk with you about this specifically, Brandon, because I think it's just such an absurd story for anybody who's been paying attention to Bitcoin for a while. They've made the rounds again, the Financial Times, with an opinion piece or hit piece that's declared Bitcoin's supposed doom. It's called the recent pullback, the worst crash since 2022. I mean, that's probably true. But then it's written by this longtime Bitcoin critic, Jemima Kelly. And it leans into this very familiar narrative that Bitcoin is on a doomed journey that ends with it splattered on the ground. It's the same script. It's a different year. But the, of course, hilarious part of this is that while they pushed this story to Asia, their Asian audience, they had to update the headline from 69,000 to 70,000. And of course, this is also many multiples above prior cycles. This is, this isn't some dire situation as the headline implies. But then, Pierre Rochard, he pointed out, look, they changed the headline to update the Bitcoin price, and he mocked this move, just talking about the editorial damage it did. And to, it's humiliating ultimately for them that they had to do this. But, I think that this is just largely indicative of this other pattern that we see. I pointed this out on X. We've seen this same Financial Times journalist who's been bear posting about Bitcoin since it was $300 a coin. So after this latest crash down to 70,000 or 69,000, whenever she wrote the article, Bitcoin is still up 23,000% from those levels. But apparently that's a failure, and apparently it's finally going to zero. And I think that this is just largely indicative of the fact that these people who have seen Bitcoin for a while, they just have this incredible bias that they've built up. Even though they've seen Bitcoin continue to survive and not be dead despite 500 obituaries, multiple 70 to 80% drawdowns, sovereign debt crises, monetary debasement, regulatory attacks, these nonstop just onslaught of FUD, Bitcoin just keeps going higher, just keeps producing new blocks. And so zooming out a little bit, it's just that we have to understand these critics aren't neutral observers. They're apparently journalists, allegedly, that's what their title says. But many of them noticed Bitcoin early. They dismissed it. They never bought. And they're in the likes of Peter Schiff, where they now just continue to keep that same preconceived notion about Bitcoin, because admitting that they were wrong would absolutely shatter their sense of self ultimately. But I want to go ahead and bring you back on here, Brandon, because this to me was just a ridiculous story. I mean, it's also obviously clickbait. Obviously, they're a legacy media outlet. They're struggling to get clicks. They know that Bitcoin FUD gets a lot of clicks. But I mean, this journalist, I don't think they can be truly that uninformed. They've been covering Bitcoin for over a decade, right? How could you still be publishing this kind of garbage?
Boy, oh boy, lack of humility, I guess, is the real answer, and or they're mockingbird assets, right? Like they're paid off by intelligence agencies in order to do this stuff, whether they know it or not. It's like, how does Hillary Clinton come out with a book? Like, come on, like who's reading that? Well, they're written by the CIA. like they're pushed out there by, and it goes for a lot of politicians, right? But it's like you always get a lot of these politicians these books, and like you're like, who in the world is reading that? And then come to find out 20 years later, it's like, oh, there's intelligence agencies pushing these narratives out there, a la the media, legacy media, or whatever, these news programs, and they're just ways to lead people around. And like you said, I mean, how are people even believing this stuff at this point? Like people watching, who's even watching at this point? But at the same time, that's where this fissure, this demographic shift is coming in massively, where there still is a lot of the older generations that still do watch it. They watch local nightly news, and a lot of these things are completely foreign to someone, like we said earlier, under 45 years old, completely foreign. And so you have this world where they're mockingbird assets, or they're just willfully ignorant, or they just lack humility. Like you said, the Peter Schiffs of the world, and I know some of it too is like we've all heard like some of the journalists say, hey, I don't want to invest in Bitcoin because I want to report accurately on it. Like I get it, but does that mean you're not investing in anything now? Like you don't have any dollars on you, don't have any stocks, so you're just gonna like void everything in your life, I guess, so like all these weird ways of like trying to justify Bitcoin. But as Wittstein said years ago, like the weird thing about Bitcoin is the only play is to play. Like that's the only play you have. Like it's the only move to make. And as Parker Lewis says too, it's a luxury, or it's not a luxury, it's a necessity. And the asymmetry of Bitcoin is that you better hope that you are right and that we are wrong. But like we don't really lose if we're wrong, but like you lose big time if the dollar apologist is wrong. And so that's where, and like to your point, like whether it's just the system collapsing or your reputation is completely tarnished, because at least Bitcoiners we're showing people a different way to do, and saying transparency, auditing, like we talked about, all these things. We're showing people a different way and trying to expose things, and so our reputation isn't damaged if an asteroid hits the Earth or something like that, and Bitcoin fails, or there's a solar flare that knocks out the entire Earth, or there's massive nuclear war. Like the couple ways maybe that Bitcoin possibly fails. That's it. And it's like, okay, well, it is what it is, I guess. That was the tail risk, and we all lost. Humanity lost. So I don't know. It's just fascinating, but I do think it's one of those things. I think it's mockingbird assets, it's willful ignorance, or it's some type of vendetta. Or this is the last one too. It's the pain of I didn't buy, and this goes back to humility, just explaining that more in the sense of I didn't buy when I heard it the first time, or I didn't put the work in years ago, whatever it is, and you have this pain and anguish, and you are mad. And you see it with people just recently, and God loves some people. Maybe they're just trying to buy a new house, or they're trying to upgrade their life, and they're loaning out their Bitcoin a little bit, and they got liquidated. A lot of it just in the last couple of weeks, and those are sad stories. But there's also people trying to play catch up. There's people doing that because they're mad about the past, and then they're not staying humble, stacking sats, and they're trying to catch up, and that's what catches up to people, and you get liquidated. And so that's why all of us always talk about self-custody and keeping your coins in self-custody. And so, and using debt carefully. I mean, debt is a part of life. You can do it in the fiat world. You can do it in the Bitcoin space, and you got to be very careful with it. And it's not. I'm not going to sit here and advocate for it, but it's. I come from the real estate world, so I've used debt many times in my life. But to each their own. It's just you got to be careful. You got to be very careful, and to suffocate the system, self-custody is the way. So again, a little bit of a side tangent there, but I think it's some of those ways. Truly, Walker, the mockingbird, the lack of humility, some of these different ways, because there's no other way to explain it, or at least a rational mind. There just isn't.
Yeah, no, and I think this is reasonable, right? And for people who may be out there saying, "Well, come on, these journalists aren't just going to lie on behalf of intelligence agencies or banks or whatever else." Well, I'd like to draw your attention to something that happened in 1914 with the illustrious Financial Times, when they lied on behalf of the Bank of England about the World War I war bonds being oversubscribed. They purposefully lied to their readers. They promoted this Bank of England propaganda, and it was not oversubscribed. They were not popular, but they were drumming up support for the war bonds, drumming up support for the war. It was not there before. There's also the whole thing with, a Bank of England insider basically getting loaned money from the Bank of England to then go out and buy the war bonds themselves, to even further astroturf the support for this. But it took the Financial Times over 100 years to correct that record. And so, you may think, well, come on, these are just journalists. They're doing God's work out there, providing us with the unbiased takes. But it's like, no. Many of them are captured, have been captured, will be captured. And this is why independent media also is so important. It's so important to be able to look at a variety of sources and be able to decide what is fact and fiction for yourself. The problem is most people just don't necessarily have the time to that. And this is why I think these types of articles are so harmful to overall adoption. And what do I care about? I don't care about somebody else buying Bitcoin because it pumps my bags. Them doing a $50 weekly DCA doesn't pump my bags. I want them to have Bitcoin because I want people to experience what Bitcoin will offer them as we go into the future. And I think they need to opt out of this broken fiat system that has caused so much harm and destruction. But unfortunately, people like Jemima Kelly are out there spreading these false narratives, and people who don't know any better read this stuff, and it's the whole Gell-Mann amnesia idea. They're not experts on Bitcoin. They don't know, but they see it coming from the Financial Times. Oh my word. Like that must be real then. And it just does so much damage. Like your job as a journalist is to try and tell the truth. If you're not telling the truth, you're not doing your job as a journalist. Like you're just, okay, it's an opinion piece. Yeah, well, your opinion is ultimately harmful to people. Your opinion is also just fundamentally wrong, but that's a different story. You can't, it's my opinion, so it can't be wrong. But this is, I think, it's a harmful narrative. And it's the same thing, slight other tangent here that I'd like your thoughts on. All of this stuff around now, all these political influencers saying Bitcoin is pedo coin now. All of these people who never really talked about Bitcoin before coming out of the woodwork. What's your read on that?
Man, it's a whole nother rabbit hole to go down. First, I was just thinking of Halen's razor for what we were just talking about, and a lot of times it also could be explained as just incompetence, right? It's, don't attribute malice to what can be explained as incompetence, and which is, again, a lot of these different angles, like you said, Gell-Mann amnesia, that's one of the different explanations too, right? So that's made me think of it, of a lot of these people they're not experts in these fields. So they're just out here pontificating because they're told to, or whatever it might be. So that's part of it. So boy, the pedo coin, it is truly wild. I mean, we've in a way been dealing with a lot of this for years, right? I mean, like we've had the NSA created it, ever since the beginning. And it's funny, like whenever someone says that the last, handful of months, I just go with it. I'm like, you know what? Like, yeah, the NSA created it, sure. And it's like CIA created it, awesome. Now what? And it's like it really like stops people on their track because like it's like, well, there's always I get what Bitcoin does, but it's always like something, some mindset, which, we've talked about before, but it's like the mindset that keeps people back, whether they think they're worthy of Bitcoin or not. The self-confidence is low, so they don't think they're worthy of their wealth, of their time and freedom, and having that feels like it should be captured by someone else, and someone else should be telling you what to do. Because that's, frankly, again, we know that to be true because the state has you from 5 years old to 18 years old, and they have you 8 hours a day, and they kind of train you that way. That's the plan. That's the way 99% of people are educated. So that feels right. Someone else's control of me. And so it feels weird to have your time and energy around you. So we've had all these different FUDs over time, obviously the energy stuff and the quantum, and the energy stuff kind of went away the last year or two because of the AI stuff. AI is good now, and because it's centralized and can control people, they think. So now we like energy. So energy is good, and it was bad when it was just Bitcoin using it, but now it's a good thing. So that kind of shows you right there. But now it transitioned into, like you said, quantum, and the Epstein stuff, which again, I bring up the thing a minute ago because if the CIA created it, or Epstein and Satoshi, which are all just, the Epstein thing is just ridiculous. But even if the NSA created it or CIA, it doesn't matter. And that's the thing that like people need to sit back and take 2 seconds, get off the hamster wheel for a second and think about it, turn off the football game for a second and think from first principles, do a little homework. Like, does it matter if Walker or Brandon created Bitcoin and we're Satoshi, or if it's CIA or NSA, or it's Hal Finney or Adam Back? It doesn't matter. It does not matter. And that's what people just miss, the forest and the trees at the end of the day. And they don't see that, hey, it's open source code, and there's not, Bitcoin is the next Bitcoin. This has been, they're trying to find how to send value over the internet for decades, and Bitcoin was the end. It was finally, Ben Franklin, figuring out, oh my gosh, and capturing electricity and all these things where like it's a protocol. It's layers of technology on top of each other. It's not just one technology. It doesn't get replaced by Facebook. It's not MySpace, and so that's what people are really grappling with. But when you have these endless FUD narrative, and I've seen it. I mean, to your point, Walker, I mean, there's a big guy who just got really big on YouTube in the last few months talking about the Charlie Kirk stuff. Has a massive following now, literally had like 500 YouTube subscribers, and now he has like 500,000 or something like that. And he's a lawyer, all this stuff. And he even was like, oh yeah, I heard Bitcoin, this could be really interesting a few months ago. And now he's like, no, it's pedo coin. Like, oh, there could be a backdoor to it and stuff like that. So it's like, it's so frustrating because you're like, how does this thing that's so obvious right here for a number of us, and then most of society is just like willfully ignorant to it or doesn't spend the time on it? It's like, a lot of people know there's a problem, but they're not even seemingly actively looking for a solution. It's almost like your brain, like humans are path of least resistance, and so you want it to be wrong almost, so that way your brain can just shut off and be like, yeah, okay, cool, like don't have to do any work, don't have to do any hard work, like yes, like awesome, I kind of thought that was the case, so it's like humans are adverse to like doing the hard work, so it's like, oh, okay, good, like someone said something, like I don't have to look into it now, like great, I can just go back to like watching the Kardashians. Here we are. So we're just dealing with this stuff. Again, the FUD at the end of the day, though, no one controls it. So whether someone, people are on the island or not, or this is happening, or it doesn't even matter who created it. It doesn't matter at the end of the day. The market's going to dictate what's happening at the end of the day. We saw it with Bcash, and we saw it with Bitcoin Satoshi Vision and the block size wars. The miners have an economic interest, and people in the system have an economic interest in nodes and people holding Bitcoin to be plugged in. And when it's time to really, really be plugged in and actually figure out what's going on or not, people will figure it out, and they are economically incentivized to figure it out. And that's the people in the system now. And the people eventually, going back to the Bitcoin's a necessity, not a luxury, as you continually get squeezed in this fiat system, people will continue running, because idiots like us will keep yelling from the treetops and from the rooftops saying, hey, this Bitcoin thing, you should probably get off that Titanic over here. This life raft's pretty nice. As you guys are going down, people will slowly trickle over until at some point the iceberg gets top heavy and flips, gradually then suddenly, and it's no longer an option. Like, it's a necessity at that point. No, we don't know when that is, but it's coming. All the FUD be damned. It's a matter of time.
Yeah, it is just frustrating because it's a time when people should be paying more attention to it than ever. It is this life raft that you've been looking for. It is the way that you defund and pull your economic energy out of this existing broken system and move it somewhere else. But unfortunately, then you've got people And as you said, I think that a lot of it does come down to wanting to be able to shut your brain off, not wanting to be able to see there could be a solution. And I see this sentiment all the time with a lot of the kind of like, and I don't want to use conspiracy theorists in a derogatory way here. I'm using that like it's a compliment, if anything. I'm just using this as a classification for anyone who's listening here. I'm something of a conspiracy theorist myself. The point being, we see this from that sort of political influencer, conspiracy theorist type crowd. Again, not an insult. I'm self-identifying as one, but they're coming out here and it's like, oh, I looked at Bitcoin for 5 minutes and I'm here to call it pedo coin. It's just ridiculous. They clearly don't know what they're talking about. They may know what they're talking about on a lot of other things, but clearly on this they don't, because if they did, they wouldn't be saying what they're saying. If you understood it, you wouldn't be saying something so obviously stupid to anybody who does understand it. And that's where it's like, I don't know if some of it is just jumping on the current thing, jumping on engagement farming. Again, not attributing to malice what can be explained by incompetence. I think a lot of it is just incompetence and just the knee-jerk reaction to jump on whatever is the current thing, the current news cycle, the current, like, this is going to get me clicks and views right now, so I better start talking about it because all the other influencers are talking about it. There's not actually a critical review of, hey, well, does this actually make sense? Maybe I should talk to somebody who knows about this. Or maybe I'll just have a bunch of other Politislop influencers on and we can all talk about how it's pedo coin and aren't we glad we didn't invest? And it's just tiresome.
Coping.
Right? It's tiresome.
It is. It's coping, and I think it's like we said earlier too. It's I didn't invest when I heard about it the first time or the 10th time I heard about it, so I'm frustrated and I'm angry. And then also, let's call it what it is. I mean, the Trump, getting into Bitcoin, quote unquote, that's rubbed obviously a lot of people the wrong way on both sides of the aisle, to a large extent. And so you have a lot of people, especially going back to the beginning of the journalists or legacy media crowd or whatever, they can't stand Bitcoin even more, right? Because it's like, oh, it's, a bunch of rednecks, it's a bunch of right wingers and blah, 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 libertarians and cypherpunks. Like, they can't stand people like that. It's a bunch of hicks with their shotguns out in rural America or something like that. Like, that's what they cannot stand. And, as we've seen throughout history, that's a lot of times, that's where the revolutions start, whether it's, a bunch of patriots or Minutemen grabbing their stuff and meeting at Lexington and Concord. Here we are again, boys, that's grab the muskets. Man.
I love it. We've got a bunch more things I want to cover here with you, Brandon. We do have to hit a quick commercial break, and then we will be right back here with more conspiracy theories right here on RoxomTV. Stay tuned. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
In a world far away. Nah, just kidding. This story begins in this world. It all started in 1460 in Antwerp, when the first commodities exchange was created, but the real transformation came in 1602, when the Amsterdam Stock Exchange was founded. Considered the oldest in the world, it was the first to trade financial assets. Over the years, Britain expanded its colonial and maritime influence, and the British pound sterling overtook the Dutch guilder in the market. Thus, the London Stock Exchange became the financial centre of the world. The 20th century came, and the world got into some trouble. But shortly after World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement established the dollar as the world's primary reserve currency, and the centre of the planet moved to Wall Street. Today, we're travelling at the speed of light towards a new age, an era shaped by the consolidation of Bitcoin as the currency that will define the future of the markets. We present Roxom, a new Bitcoin-denominated market that allows trading all sorts of securities, commodities, derivatives, options, and anything you can imagine. Roxom, rock-solid markets.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
No! Bitcoin! Come on, little buddy! Bitcoin! I need you! Don't go!
Welcome back to RoxomTV, everyone. My name is Walker America. The price of Bitcoin is just underneath 69,000 infinitely printable US dollars for Bitcoin. Per Bitcoin, I'm here with Brandon Gentile, a friend of Roxom, a guest on the show multiple times now. We're going to go ahead and shift gears a little bit and just zoom out and talk a little bit about kind of broad vibes in the market. Because, Brandon, what we've just been discussing right up to the break was about all of this Epstein, comparing Bitcoin to Epstein, saying it's somehow associated, captured, whatever. It's pedo coin, buy my shit coin, by the way. Hey, by the way, this is why XRP is better than Bitcoin. All of these familiar narratives. You've seen the Coinbase ad at the Super Bowl, a lot of the reaction videos to that with people being, clearly not liking the Bitcoin and the crypto rug pull there, but Bitcoin gets lumped in with all of that too. We've got the price that's obviously taken a bit of a beating recently, significantly lower than, I think most people expected it to be. You've got old narratives coming out about, the Financial Times pushing out all this FUD. I mean, it seems like the vibes are at that point where, at least for me, in my limited time in Bitcoin, whenever things get this seemingly dark, that tends to be right about the point that it seems to have bottomed. I don't know if that's your read on this too. It's always usually the point where when all the people come out of the woodwork to FUD Bitcoin, when everybody comes out to dunk, that's usually somewhere right around a bottom. I remember it was like that in 2022 when Bitcoin was right at 16K and everyone was like, see, I told you. And it's going back to, it's going all the way to zero or -0, according to Peter Zahan. Well, Bitcoin went on an epic run after that, basically all the way to 125K before now coming down here. Still up multiples from that bottom in 2016 or 2022. But what's your read on just the overall vibe of things right now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the sentiment is not great, and in sentiment, perception is reality, really. So it's to me the education level of sound money, maybe the system Bitcoin is reflected in its price, to a large extent, and maybe there's a little bit of a swing up above and below that at times, obviously, just with that sentiment. But generally, it's a lot of the Westerners in the world don't need it, because it's like, hey, my bank account works today, and that's it's like we've been saying, conspiracy theorists are always wrong until they're right, and that's where it's like the gradually then suddenly meme. All these things where like even the price of Bitcoin itself, you think about it, and it's like what is like that? There's only 10 days a year. If you miss those 10 days up, like you miss everything. So really, what that's saying is 355 days of basically every year, you're either going sideways or down in essence, like a lot of times. Like it's kind of like you live in this world of like just being beaten up all the time, and you're there because, like we said earlier, you have, it's a shining city on a hill for you. It's the Constitution or Bill of Rights 2.0, the Declaration of Independence, is the white paper, and it's the new version of the digital stone that hopefully we can enforce these rules a little bit better going forward, and that's the hope. But not many people are going to see that in the beginning. It's the early minority that sees that in the beginning, and then it's very frustrating because the rest of the clan comes a lot later, and they have to get beat over the face, unfortunately, and that's why we're here, because like you said earlier, someone buying $50 DCA every week doesn't pump our back. That doesn't do anything. It's like you just want your friends and your family, the people around you, to get off the Titanic. Like that's literally why we do what we do every day. And it's like all the great tweets and the content you put out and coming on here and the podcast we do and all this different stuff. I mean, it's literally there. it's not like we're sitting here, up on some mighty hill and we have all the power in the world because we're doing it. It's just because you literally are like, hey, can we please fix humanity? What's going on around us? Can we fix the governance that's going on around us? The chaos? Can we minimize the social unrest? That's why we're doing it at the end of the day. So it's the sentiment's really bad. I think I just saw the fear and greed index is like 9. I don't remember ever seeing it in the single digits. Now I'm not looking at that index super often, but that was maybe one of the lowest reads I've seen in a long time. I was talking to Parker Lewis just yesterday, and he had said that he thinks that's some of the worst sentiment he has felt in a while. But he said at the same time, maybe it's the market's bigger than it was, like you said, like 4 years ago, 2022, or even 2017 when things crashed. And he's like, that was really bad, but the market was much smaller. So maybe, like on a relative scale, maybe it's not quite as bad actually. Like we're not at 3,000 like we were in 2017 when it crashed down. We're at 70,000, so it's like, he's like, at a relative scale, it's like you do truly have to zoom out and kind of be like, oh yeah, we crashed down 50%. Oh, we're still at 70,000, or whatever, right? Like it was at 60, now it's 70. So it's like we're down 40% or whatever. So all that being said, I think we're a prisoner of the moment, fooled by randomness at times, whether it's like the pedo coin. That we go back to some of the FUD though too. That obviously hampers the price. I think Wall Street's got their hand in what's going on. I know I just interviewed Caitlin Long. I just interviewed Samson Mao. They all said, oh yeah, there's definitely funny games going on. I know if Checkmate was on here, he'd be like, no, there's nothing going on in the analysis on my on-chain metrics. Dang it, why are you guys saying that? But I think, like Caitlin and Samson are like, no, there's definitely FTX style funny games being played. But the beauty of Bitcoin is people will blow themselves up. They will, whoever's playing funny games, they will be gone. And the society keeps learning. They see FTX, and then a bunch of people learn. And then if you an individual and you got dummied in the last couple of weeks, Godspeed to you. You learn and then you see the price go up. And then Joe Carlasari and American HODL, I just had them too, and they were just talking about, like, again, price goes back up to 6 figures again. Can you imagine what the sentiment will be like at that point? And then people will see it. Everyone, right? Whether it's the Financial Times or it's you people like you and me or whatever it is, just the plebs, we all see it and we're like, oh my gosh, like it rises from the ashes again like a phoenix, and that trains everyone again, like, oh my gosh, this thing literally is the Undertaker, it won't die. And then things can go off to the races, and that's kind of where I see things at, where it's like we said in the beginning, it's the properties of Bitcoin, doesn't matter who created it, nothing has changed. It's just who's pumping out the new FUD of the day because they have an economic benefit. Like, the system won't go quietly. It's like King George sending the soldiers over here across the ocean and getting a bunch of German Navy SEALs, in essence, the Hessians, to come over and fight the Patriots over here. That's what's going on. And it's like, they're not going to go quietly. Like, George wrote a letter and said, hey guys, here's the Declaration of Independence. We're done with you guys. King George didn't just say, yeah, you know what? You're right, George. You guys can have that whole continent. You're right. No, he said, F you, I'm coming over and they had to fight for it. I mean, this is, shame on us for all thinking this is going to be easy, and Trump comes in and acknowledges all of us. And because truth be told, a lot of us, you think like, okay, this is like an acknowledgement to society. It's not that we needed to know we were right. We've done the homework. But hey, this guy, a political figure that people think is important, well, guess what? He's saying this. So now maybe a bunch of people will see it. Well, not really, and so, like, hey, the fight's gonna drag out. It's gonna keep happening, and here we are, and we just got one foot in front of the other, and it's gonna be a battle. It's an information battle.
First of all, great bullish rant there. I'm already feeling more bullish because of it, and I think that you're exactly right here. That people need to understand that this was never going to be a smooth sailing. We weren't on calm seas here, right? We were on the rough seas. The rough subsidized seas of the fiat snow globe, right? And I think that it's a great point too about what happens when Bitcoin does, because it will. And this, for people who are listening, maybe you've stumbled across this because at Roxom we also try to do a great job of covering world news, right? Not just Bitcoin focused things. We try to cover a broad swath. But if you've stumbled across this and you are not yet saving in Bitcoin, and you think, well, Bitcoin's at 70,000. It's done now, right? Maybe you believe like Jemima Kelly does in the Financial Times that Bitcoin is $70,000 or $69,000 too expensive and it's going to zero. Or maybe you think it's going negative like Peter Zahan. Maybe you have that few brain cells to rub together. If you think that, I have news for you. You are wrong. You are wrong, and you will be proven wrong very quickly. You will be proven wrong in such a way that it may break you psychologically, and you may end up like the Peter Zahans, the Jemima Kellys, the Peter Schiffs of the world. You may be so psychologically broken after watching Bitcoin go, in Jemima Kelly's case, 23,000% higher from the first time she started talking about it until now, even after this big crash in the 70,000, you will be broken by it. Now, I don't care if you buy Bitcoin. I truly don't care. Do whatever you want. I don't know you listening. I know some of you listening, and thank you for listening. I really appreciate you spending your scarce time with me, but I don't know all of you. It does not benefit me at all if you buy more Bitcoin. In fact, that's less potential sats that are out there in the market for me to buy cheap. I want those cheap sats because I know what I hold. I want you to have Bitcoin because Bitcoin is the one way that we have to defund this bloated, kleptocratic, geriatric system that has been perpetuated by the fiat regime. It is the only way we will get out of it, is by influencing it from the outside, by building a parallel system that siphons wealth, siphons productivity, siphons good vibes out of that bad vibe system, and ultimately builds a better one and forces that system to change from the outside because it won't change from the inside. And so to people out there listening, if you really think that Bitcoin is not going to go back up over 100,000 again, and then is not going to go to 500,000 and to 1 million and so on and so forth, because you need to understand you are wrong. And you're also thinking in such short time frames. You need to be thinking in terms of 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 40 years. I am, because, and Brandon, I know you are too, because we have young families. So we are thinking about what happens when we are old men. What world are we living to our children? We hope that, and their children. We hope that it's a better one, and we hope that it's one that's built on a sound money standard so we can build a sound society on top of it. But again, I just want to caution people. If you're out there listening and you think Bitcoin's not going to just absolutely rip your face off when you least expect it, you got another thing coming. And Brendan, this is what I don't understand. I don't understand how you can have seen Bitcoin go, and even if you're just a casual observer in this, you're not a Financial Times journalist or something like that, how you can have seen Bitcoin be declared dead and rise from the ashes. You've probably seen that happen at least once because it's happened so many times. How you can say, oh, but this time is different. This time it really is dead. I mean, it's literally like some sort of psychosis, almost this Bitcoin derangement syndrome or something like that. I don't know how to describe it because it's just purely irrational.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Walker, it is tough. I mean, the last handful of years, I've actually, and again, it's maybe being too nihilistic or black-pilled at times, but you kind of look around and like, it's kind of scary sometimes to be around people who don't understand Bitcoin, because the first 10 years or so, I get it, like that was, the first 10 years were definitely the hardest part, or at least 2009 to 17 or 09 to 2018, 2019, until it started kind of coming back up again. So into 2020, and that first 10 years is rough, and I can understand. But the last 5 years, what's happened with COVID, governments around the world, it's almost inexcusable at this point, and that's what's very fascinating to me. And I don't want to be like, I don't want to be hard on people in the sense of like, I want to have empathy, but at the same time, you do question people to your point of like, what are you doing? And again, like there's people out there. I was just telling someone the other day that now zooming out, the last 20 years or 20 years ago, if you would have asked me, would the richest guy in the world be talking about conspiracy theories, or would there people be like the Candace Owens of the world going down these rabbit holes of satanic pedophile cults and trying to get to the bottom of them? And there's people among her doing the same thing. No, I would have laughed you out of the room. I would have said the things that I thought or kind of read about or studied was like, it was so far outside the lexicon that I would have laughed at you. So I will say in the macro, we are winning. Truth is winning. We're getting there. We're getting ever closer. At the same time, it's a double-edged sword of the thing that's frustrating at times is someone like a Candace Owens, who I think is directionally going the right way. It's like she's close to the target, but she's not over the target, and that can be dangerous at times because the people up above, they know you're not over the target. You're the town over. Most of society is like in another country. They're so far away. But the people like a Tucker Carlson or a Candace Owens, or maybe people on the left, I don't know, you could call it Young Turks or who knows, whatever. A lot of those people, they tend to be like around the target, but they're like in a town or two over, and they know that the explosion of the blast can't hit the target. So the people at the top don't care. It's the bread and circus people have heard from the Roman Colosseum, where the treasury is where the games are going on, the clipping of the coins, the melting down, but the games are being played in the Colosseum, distracting the populace. And it's kind of what a lot of these figures are doing at the end of the day, these political figures who seem like they're going the right direction. They've got a lot of influence, but the people at the top, the Rothschild and their ilk, love it because it's so much distraction for months at a time. People going down these playing, a fool's errand at the end of the day, going nowhere because we don't, JFK, like who knows? No one knows. You're never going to find out what happened to these people, and it doesn't matter. What you should be asking is they're asking the wrong question. Why is this happening? Not who did it or how this happened. It's why is this happening, and what's the mechanism that allows these things to happen? And that's what Bitcoiners have figured out. And I think that it's going to, again, take some more time, more of these dumb things happening. And I will say too, I've had a couple of people recently. Parker said this when 1 in 20 people get Bitcoin and like really kind of grok it, that's when he feels like the iceberg flips, and we're obviously not even close to there yet. And I've had Brian DeMint and Matteo Pellegrini tell me recently that their thought is when monthly inflation gets to, and Parker actually said a similar thing too, actually, before I even told him about Brian and Matteo saying this, but once inflation gets to a monthly single digit print for the average person, or Parker said it, if you go to the store and your steak is $7 and then the next month it's $7.50 and then the next month it's $8, that type of thing, a monthly change like that, that's when people really start, in all their minds, it'll start waking people up, and we'll get this like iceberg flipping moment. So anyway, all that being said, it's so wild, and you could just talk for hours about this, Walker. Like truly, it's
Thankfully, we get to do that. Ben. We do get to talk for hours about these things because you're right, and this is, I think, what is so important for people to understand right now is just that we are at a unique moment in time. I did not think, maybe I was too bullish too early, but fiat is a bad measuring stick, right? I did not think we were going to get a chance to buy Bitcoin this cheaply again. I truly didn't. No. And so because that was my expectation, I was actually a little bit bummed to see the price doing what it was when it was up in the 125,000, because I was thinking, dang, I really would have liked to get more for my dollars. I thought I was going to have longer to get Bitcoin cheap, and then once it went higher, I did not think I was going to have that chance again. I've had that chance again. Now we have that chance right now. And again, you need to understand that this is going one way. We have the unstoppable force of infinite fiat demand meeting the immovable object of absolutely finite 21 million supply. It does not take a genius to work that out. And you can already see what happens in countries where the currencies are hyperinflating versus the dollar. They're hyperinflating versus Bitcoin, right? And so people need to grapple with that and come to terms with the fact that, look, this is a one-way ticket. It's that the train is, in the process of leaving the station. You've still got some time, though. You've still got a lot of time. I mean, think about the kids that are not yet born yet, right? We are still early because we are at a tiny, like maybe 1 in 100 people, maybe, that own Bitcoin. Yep. I mean, there's different estimates out there, but it's very low. It's very, very low. Of those people, yes. What percent actually understand it enough not to sell when there's a drawdown? Even smaller percent. What percent actually hold their own UTXOs in self-custody? Even smaller percent. We are still in the innovators phase of this adoption curve. We are not even at the early adopters phase. We're still in the innovators phase. And furthermore, Bitcoin's not an iPhone. It's not a tech stock. It's not NVIDIA. It's not flat screen TVs. It is something totally different. It's not a washing machine. It's not the car. No, it's a monetary technology that we've never seen before. I don't understand how this is actually going to play out over the coming decades, but I do know the general direction of it. And directionally, it's going up and to the right forever. What it does along the way, look at the chart of the gold versus the Weimar mark in Weimar, Germany, right?
Yes.
This is going to look volatile because we're measuring in the wrong thing. Gold was stable during that period, but the price of gold looked pretty ridiculous and it's seesawing up and down because it was the Weimar mark that was going to zero. That's what we're seeing now too. We're just not quite, I started saying recently that hyperinflation is here. It's just not evenly distributed yet.
Walker, you literally took two of the things I was thinking right out of my mind. That I was going to bring up the gold chart, the Weimar gold chart, and it's hard to see when you're in the middle of it. It's hard to see, obviously, and that's where it'll become obvious 10 years from now or 50 years. People look back and it's like, oh wow, it should have been obvious. It's always hard because we're living through it, and things happen on a day-to-day basis. It kind of happens slowly, obviously. Like, it's just we live our life and things kind of happen, and then you put the pieces together like later on, it looks obvious. And like you said, it is. The education is unevenly distributed, and it's all different education levels of it's different need. It's the privilege of being in the West of Gladstein's book. If you check your financial privilege, where like a lot of people don't need it, like we talked about earlier, like they just don't need it yet. And so then you have, again, just from another angle, you have, I mean, Trump and his team are in the White House, like them or not, but they are, at least for the most part, it looks like they're behind Bitcoin. I mean, they sure have a lot of mining stuff going on, American Bitcoin. And I think you would probably concur, but like the way Eric and Donald talk about it now is much different than a few years ago. They seem to grok Bitcoin itself. I even asked Matt Prusak, runs American Bitcoin mining, and I was like, hey, do they get Bitcoin now? The difference in crypto? And he's like, yeah. He's like, I can tell you that yes, they do. They didn't initially, and they do now. And I just talked to him recently. So you have that, and then you have BlackRock. Like you think, Wall Street greed. Like you can't bet against Wall Street greed. Now, is there a case to make of like, can they change the narrative of what's going on and start swaying people and like, hey, it's all custody and stuff like that in ETFs? Well, yeah, I mean, that's something we have to watch out for and continually educate people about that. But they want their bags pumped. Like let's be really real. So like you said, Bitcoin is going to go up. And the greatest thing of all that we know is the properties don't change. Coming back to the beginning of this hour, the properties have not changed. No matter what FUD, the CIA created Bitcoin or whatever, it doesn't matter. The narratives don't matter. What are the properties? What is actually the boots on the ground? It takes real world energy and resources to acquire Bitcoin, whether it's your own time and energy or you're mining Bitcoin. It's the only way. There's no pre-mine, there's no insiders, there's none of that. That's not how Bitcoin works. And that's so important, I think, to keep getting back to. And I think the last couple of years, we have lost our way with that. We all of us, like the Bitcoiners, have lost our way, and we've gotten maybe too into the narrative of price because it is a great marketing arm, but at the same time, it's educating the people that are coming in too. We can't forget to keep talking about what makes Bitcoin beautiful, what makes it great, what makes it powerful, what makes it stand out against all the rest. And I think I'm seeing people kind of starting to get back to that a little bit, and in having pieces written in books and more podcasts and like all these different things, and what's going on at Roxom, and like all these things will start coming together more and getting back to some of the basics. And because all those narratives, the government, BlackRock, Trump, all these things we've talked about, and then at the end of the day, we know sure as hell that the government has to print currency. It's a debt-based system backed by nothing. So you have to print. It's guaranteed to print. And we know all of human history has shown us every fiat currency has gone to zero. So we know that for sure, that means that Titanic hit the iceberg, it's going down. And your only chance, not saying Bitcoin is the end-all be-all, it's perfect or whatever, but we know it's a life raft, and it's your only shot of not going into the ocean and being 12,000 feet below in the next 4 hours. That's it. That's what we're saying to you. And it's your choice now. It's up to you.
I cannot imagine a better note to end on than that. That about sums it up. And if you're not listening now, well, don't worry, because we're going to keep talking to you about it indefinitely until you finally do wake up, and we'll be still.
The beatings will continue until morale changes, Walker, right?
Exactly. Exactly. We'll be doing that here on RoxomTV on your show as well. And speaking of which, where do you want to send folks who enjoy these rants and want to hear more?
Yeah, again, thank you so much, Walker, team, Roxom, everybody. Brandon_Gentili is the YouTube channel, just my name there, Twitter, everything, Nostr. You can find me in all those places, and Spotify, etc. So I appreciate you guys again, and look forward to doing it again soon.
Likewise, my friend. Always great to have you here on the show. Highly recommend people do go and check out Brandon. And I want to thank you, Brandon, and also everybody who tuned in here for this stream today. I do this every Tuesday, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on RoxomTV. You can also catch me on Thursdays and Fridays on Hank's show for the second hour. Make sure to check that if you haven't already. Thank you for sharing your scarce time with us here on RoxomTV. Again, I am Walker America, and I will see you next week. Take care.
in a world far away. Nah, just kidding. This story begins in this world. It all started in 1460 in Antwerp, when the first commodities exchange was created, but the real transformation came in 1602, when the Amsterdam Stock Exchange was founded. Considered the oldest in the world, it was the first to trade financial assets. Over the years, Britain expanded its colonial and maritime influence, and the British pound sterling overtook the Dutch guilder in the market. Thus, the London Stock Exchange became the financial centre of the world. The 20th century came, and the world got into some trouble. But shortly after World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement established the dollar as the world's primary reserve currency, and the centre of the planet moved to Wall Street. Today, we're travelling at the speed of light towards a new age, an era shaped by the consolidation of Bitcoin as the currency that will define the future of the markets. We present Roxom, a new Bitcoin-denominated market that allows trading all sorts of securities, commodities, derivatives, options, and anything you can imagine. Roxom.